Chapter 853. The first light of dawn appeared on the star. Sumo, Yuluo, and Yi Wuhui had already disappeared. They could only rest on the nameless planet. After all, the Kuan butterfly star ocean was only 3 million miles away. The mountain people in the bamboo forest gradually woke up. Last night they all had a good night's sleep. As for the nameless woman, she stretched her body. Her figure was graceful and exquisite. Then, she stood up. "Second brother Ma, I'm going to wash my face, then I'll go to Nanshan Mountain to chop bamboo. You don't have to wait for me. I'll see you on the mountain," the woman said to a tall man not far away. "All right," the man replied. Thus, the woman left the group and went straight into the valley. There was a small stream flowing in the valley. It was so clear that the bottom could be seen. The woman squatted on a bluestone and cupped the stream water to wash her face. As expected, after washing her face, the woman's face was extremely beautiful, like a lotus flower emerging from the water. She did not look like an ordinary woman at all. She cupped the stream water 3 times in a row. And on the 3rd time, the stream suddenly emitted a strange brilliance. In the middle of the stream, a strange door of light appeared. Whoosh, black and white mystic light rose. The woman stood up and sighed softly. She stepped into the stream and instantly disappeared. The entire stream returned to its original state. There was not even a splash. Outside the Kuan butterfly star ocean, there was nothing but emptiness in the universe. Previously, from billions of miles away, Sumo and the others could see the entire Kuan butterfly star ocean. Now, when they came to the periphery of the Kuan butterfly star ocean, they could not see the entire star ocean. They could only see a corner of it. In the distance, they saw a light purple star. That meant that they were about to face the Kuan butterfly barrier. "Demon King, I think we're about to encounter the Kuan butterfly barrier. Let's all be careful." Yuluo looked at Sumo and Yi Wuhui. "Yao Ying, if anything happens, you must protect Miss Yi," Sumo instructed. "Yao Ying understands," Yao Ying replied. Sumo nodded and then urged the demonic boat. They headed straight for the lavender star. Outside the Kuan butterfly star ocean, they still had a star chart to refer to. However, inside the Kuan butterfly star ocean, they didn't have a star chart. Everything in the Kuan butterfly star sea was unknown to them. They didn't feel any discomfort as the magic boat moved forward. Sumo and Yuro both released their venerable realm divine senses, but they didn't find anything strange. The light blue star was getting closer and closer. Along the way, they did not encounter any obstructions. Moreover, they were extremely fast. That kind of speed seemed to be beyond normal. The Kuan butterfly star sea seemed to be able to accelerate everything. In less than 2 hours, they arrived at the light purple planet. They chose to land directly on this star. After all, this was the Kuan butterfly star ocean. It was better to ask the cultivators inside than to wander around like headless flies. "Looks like it went very smoothly," Yi Wuhui said. "Could it be that this barrier is useless against Exalt realm cultivators?" "That's possible," Yuro nodded. "However, I haven't heard of Exalts being unobstructed." Sumo also frowned. She felt that things weren't that simple. "Let's take a look at this star first," Sumo said as she released her divine senses. This light purple star was much bigger than the last star they had landed on. There are many cultivators on this star. Yuro also released her divine senses. The highest level is actually at the rebirth realm, and there's more than one. "Yes," Sumo smiled playfully. "There are 7 rebirth realm cultivators on this star? The highest level is actually at the 5th stage rebirth realm, and there are many cultivators of other levels. This is unbelievable. One should know that this was only the first star they had entered the Kuan butterfly star ocean. It shouldn't be a small world. It was ridiculous to have 7 rebirth realm cultivators on a star. There were many stars in the Prajna star sea. However, not every star was called Southern Chilan or Divine Peacock Mountain. Many small worlds didn't even have a single rebirth realm cultivator, let alone a star. However, the spirit chi on this star isn't abundant. Why are there so many cultivators cultivating? There aren't enough resources. Yi Wuhui also frowned. Although she was only at the 3rd stage rebirth realm, she could still cover the entire star. This star should be very barren. Interesting. Sumo smiled. Let's go deeper and take a look. Perhaps this is a special star in the Kuan butterfly star ocean. As they spoke, they arrived at a city. That was because the city was the closest to them. Although it was called a city, it was built on a mountain. It could be said that it was in a very primitive state of being half a mountain and half a city. There was an array gate in the void. There was an array board on the gate. It read, Half Return City. Half Return City? Sumo and the other two were puzzled when they saw the name. There were no restrictions on entering the city. The entire city wasn't flourishing, and it was even a little old. There were almost no palaces or pavilions in the city, but there were many short mountains and potholes. There were also some cave dwellings and courtyards, but they were very scattered. The city looked like a barbarian's place. There wasn't even a proper landmark. Sumo, Yuluo, and Yi Wuhui couldn't help but look at each other. What kind of city was this? Ordinary cultivator cities wouldn't be like this. Moreover, the cultivators in the city weren't weak. That city gate was a world immortal rank formation. Currently, there were quite a few first-era mortals in Bongi City. Any one of them could cause earth-shattering changes in this city. However, no one seemed to care about any of this. The city's quality had nothing to do with them. Sumo and the other two looked down. At the center of the city, they found a plaza. The plaza was 500 meters long and wide. It was rather flat and extremely clean. There were many cultivators exchanging items in the plaza. It was a large market. The market was the only place in this city that was not bad at all. Sumo and the others landed on the plaza. The cultivators in the plaza seemed to be used to the foreign cultivators. No one paid special attention to them. What should be sold was sold, and what should be bought was bought. Everything was normal. Sumo and the others glanced at the things the cultivators were exchanging with each other. Whether it was elixirs, spirit talismans, or various divine weapons, none of them caught their attention. To them, those were all unfashionable things. So, they stopped looking. Fellow Taoist, may I ask where this place is? Sumo asked a middle-aged sea destruction cultivator. Bongi City. The middle-aged cultivator was still organizing his things and didn't even look up. His answer was almost a nonsense. Wasn't it written on the Bongi City? No one could see it. Ha ha! Sumo wasn't angry. He didn't explain clearly just now, so she said, Fellow Taoist, may I ask what planet this is? It belongs to the small world in the Kuan butterfly star ocean? Hearing Sumo's question, the middle-aged cultivator raised his head and looked at Sumo like she was an idiot. You're new here, right? What new here? Sumo and the others were stunned. Fellow Taoist, we've indeed just arrived on this planet, Yuluo said. Ha ha! Hearing Yuluo's answer, the middle-aged cultivator couldn't help but smile helplessly. I told you that you're new. Otherwise, why would you ask such a question? Sumo and the others frowned. What did he mean? Alas! The middle-aged cultivator sighed. Let me tell you, this planet is called Bongi, because this isn't the Kuan butterfly star ocean at all. You've entered the barrier and been teleported out. This place is 5 million miles away from the Kuan butterfly star ocean. Bongi Bongi, you've returned halfway. Chapter 854. Half-Returned Star. Returning halfway? Hearing the middle-aged cultivator's words, Sumo, Yuluo, and Yi Wuhui's expressions changed drastically. The three of them looked at the middle-aged cultivator in disbelief. Hee. The middle-aged cultivator smiled helplessly. Your eyes are probably the same as mine back then. When I first arrived here, I didn't believe it either. However, you can ask the cultivators in the surrounding area. This half-returned star is barren of resources, and there aren't many native cultivators. More than 90% of the cultivators in this half-returned city want to enter the Kuan butterfly star ocean but failed. However, no one is willing to give up, so they stay here and try to advance further. Of course, no one is interested in building this city. The only fun is that everyone can exchange what they need with each other. Some fellow Taoists have already returned to the half-Gue star countless times. The middle-aged cultivator smiled bitterly and shook his head. Fellow Taoists, your cultivation levels should be quite high. At this moment, another Sea of Destruction cultivator heard their conversation. However, I've slowly gotten used to it. I tried more than 10 times, but I couldn't pass through the Kuan butterfly barrier. However, you still have hope. Alas! The middle-aged cultivator continued, I hope you still have hope. I heard that there are a few reincarnation almighties on this half-returned star. They also didn't pass through the barrier. However, I've only heard of them and have never seen them. When Sumo and the others heard this, they couldn't help but smile bitterly. Half-returned star. They really didn't expect such a situation. The three of them continued to walk forward. Yi Wuhui asked a few more cultivators, and sure enough, they said the same thing. These cultivators came from almost every corner of the Prajna realm. The cultivator who came the furthest was a prince of a small world in the Chilan star realm. He was a one-lifetime immortal realm cultivator, and it took him more than 1,000 years to reach the Kuan butterfly star ocean. Unfortunately, he had been teleported back 30 times, but he wasn't ready to give up. It was said that there were many stars like the half-returned star in the periphery of the Kuan butterfly star ocean. They entered the Kuan butterfly star ocean through different routes, so they were teleported to different stars. In Bangi City, they even encountered a cultivator who was teleported to 3 different planets. He said that every planet was about the same. These stars were poor in resources and were about 10 million miles away from the Kuan butterfly star ocean. Sumo and the other 2 circled around the plaza and couldn't help but feel a chill in their hearts. This was because they had never heard of a cultivator being teleported to the half-returning star and then re-entering the Kuan butterfly star ocean. However, on second thought, the cultivators who entered the Kuan butterfly star ocean would naturally not return, so they felt a little relieved. In the end, they found a relatively detailed star map of the Kuan butterfly star ocean in the square. Bangi City was indeed located 10 million miles away. The star they had once landed on was in the other direction of the Kuan butterfly star ocean. Although it wasn't across the entire sea of stars, it was still more than 30 million kilometers away from Bangi City. The 3 of them found a secluded place and rested for a while. Senior Demon King, we didn't feel anything strange before. Yuluo frowned and said, How did we get teleported 10 million miles away? Sumo nodded and smiled bitterly. Yes. Both of us supremacies didn't sense anything strange and were teleported here without a sound. The Kuan butterfly star ocean is really strange and unpredictable. Demon Shadow, did you find anything? Our ship suddenly sped up at a node. The Desolation Demon Shadow's voice sounded. The Desolation Demon Shadow had always been hiding in Yi Wuhui's shadow. Therefore, his perception was sometimes more sensitive than Sumo and Yuluo's. Previously, Sumo and Yuluo's attention was more on the light purple planet they saw. In fact, it was a kind of illusion in itself. Sumo was stunned. Previously, I also felt the demonic ship speed up, but I didn't pay attention to the specific node. I thought it was caused by entering the Kuan butterfly star ocean. Demon Shadow, do you remember that node? Can you find it? That node should be the barrier of the Kuan butterfly star ocean. If we go the same way again, it should be about the same. The Demon Shadow said. Alright. Sumo said, let's go. There was no time to lose. This time they didn't succeed, but it aroused their curiosity. It should be known that Sumo's attainments in array formations were the true teachings of 7th Senior Sister Windwheel. Yuluo and Yiwuhue were both from famous sects, and the Desolation Demon Shadow was a master of the demon race. However, such a combination actually didn't realize that they had entered the array. This was simply unacceptable to them. However, this also gave them a wake-up call. Previously, they were a little careless. Although there were many legends about the Kuan butterfly barrier, they were not prepared for it. Only now did they realize how powerful the Kuan butterfly barrier was. 2 supremacies didn't even touch the door of the Kuan butterfly star ocean. If word got out, it would be really embarrassing. After leaving Half-Return City, Sumo directly took out the demonic ship. The 3 of them boarded the demonic ship, and Sumo steered it out of the inner space of Half-Return City. Then, she made a spatial jump. In just one spatial jump, they appeared in the sky above the star where they had landed last time. The 3 of them looked at each other and couldn't help but laugh at each other. After a big circle, they actually returned to the original point, 3 million miles away from the Kuan butterfly star ocean. Sumo didn't dare to use spatial jumps again. First, the distance was too close. Second, they didn't know the specific boundaries of the Kuan butterfly star ocean. The slightest mistake would lead to a huge error. They didn't want to be teleported to Half-Return City again. Thus, they could only advance according to the previous route. What was different was that there was a 500-foot-wide shadow below the demonic ship. That was the Desolation Demon Shadow's shadow body. It was like a radar that detected everything around it. Sumo and Yuluo focused their attention, unwilling to let even the slightest change slip by. Only Yiwuhue was a little relaxed. With the 2 supremacies here, she really didn't need to do anything. The demonic ship advanced, almost like a carpet search. After a little more than an hour, the Desolation Demon Shadow's shadow body couldn't help but pause. Demon King, stop the ship. Sumo stopped the demonic ship and looked at the 500-foot-wide shadow. The part before the demonic ship was nowhere to be seen. It seemed to have been cut off and swallowed. They couldn't see the shadow 300 feet in front of them. If they hadn't stopped the ship just now, they might have disappeared too. Whoosh, looking again, the shadow under Yiwuhue's feet began to extend infinitely to both sides. 100 feet, 1,000 feet, 10,000 feet. In fact, the Desolation Demon Shadow's magic power was enough to extend for hundreds of thousands of miles. However, there was no need for that. At this moment, what appeared in front of Sumo and the others was like a screen wall. From their perspective, 10,000 feet away, it looked straight up, down, left, and right. However, they didn't understand that this barrier was most likely spherical, because that was the only way to protect the entire Kuan butterfly star ocean. Just thinking about it was enough to make one feel shocked. Chapter 855. A black barrier appeared in the starry sky. In reality, the Kuan butterfly barrier was an invisible existence. At this moment, it was only because of the Desolation's shadow's ability that it appeared in this area. Sumo, Yuro, and Yiwuhue were all shocked. This was definitely an interstellar formation. It seems that the person who set up this barrier must be a Lotus Knight. Sumo said. The Kuan butterfly race has Lotus Knights? Yuro frowned. It's hard to say. Sumo said. At this moment, Yiwuhue waved a hand, and a purple light penetrated the barrier. What she threw out was a mortal puppet. It was a puppet in the form of a hunting dog. Whoosh! The purple hound pierced through the barrier without any resistance. The strangest thing was that after it passed through the black barrier, Sumo and the others could still see it. It didn't disappear like the shadow. Yiwuhue couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. How is it? Sumo asked. Currently, it's still in my divine sense. However, it left extremely quickly. That wasn't the speed I gave it. At this moment, there was only the half-returning star in its eyes. It feels the same as when we first met. Yiwuhue said. It seems that entering this barrier will cause one to fall into an illusion. Even puppets are no exception, Sumo said. This is a rather high-level formation. The puppet dog disappeared. Yi Wuhui frowned. It broke free from my control when it was 150,000 kilometers away. It must have been transported away. Could it be that this barrier is 150,000 kilometers thick? Euro said. Perhaps. Sumo sighed. The Lotus Knight's spells are unpredictable. After all, we haven't even glimpsed the Lotus Realm yet. Sumo, can't you tell what's wrong with this formation? Yi Wuhui asked. Let me take a closer look. At this moment, Sumo's demon eye had already opened. However, under the demon eye, nothing seemed to have changed. In other words, the demon eye was useless. Such a barrier formation made it impossible for anyone to attack. I can let a higher-level cultivation puppet go in and give it a try, Yi Wuhui said. No need. Sumo shook her head. We didn't notice anything unusual before. Even if I let a Kako in, the situation would most likely be the same. If even supremacies can teleport, what else is impossible? What do we do now? Yulu asked. Sumo smiled helplessly. Outside the barrier, we can't see any clues. It seems that we can only enter the barrier again. Perhaps we can find a way to break it. Yuluo and Yi Wuhui nodded. From the looks of it, there was no better way. Yao Ying, when we enter the barrier later, use your shadow body to see if you can find anything, Sumo said. All right. Demon Shadow understands. Desolation's Demon Shadow nodded. Thus, the desolate Demon Shadow retracted its shadow body. Sumo urged the magic boat forward, and they once again passed through the barrier. Once they passed through the barrier, they felt the magic boat suddenly speed up. Sumo completely stopped urging the magic boat forward, but they still headed straight for the half-returned star. Somehow, there seemed to be some kind of suction force pulling the magic boat forward. Sumo stealthily urged the magic boat to move backwards, but it was useless. The magic boat still flew at a very fast speed towards the half-returned star. It seemed that once they entered the barrier, they would no longer be able to control the magic boat. However, this time, they knew what was going on. Sumo and the other two were on guard. Desolation's Demon Shadow scattered around the magic boat. Their speed was indeed slower than it had been that day. However, the half-returned star was still getting closer and closer to them. Soon, they were about to break through 300,000 kilometers. And at this time, there was actually an immortal-ranked cultivator flying past them on a magic treasure. In reality, Sumo and the others really wanted to call out to him. However, when they spread out their consciousness, that cultivator did not respond. That immortal was riding on a lotus platform, and its speed was not any slower than the magic boat, perhaps even faster. In that cultivator's eyes, there was only that faint star in the distance. Everything else was of no concern to him. He's already fallen into an illusion, Yi Wuhui said. That's right. Sumo smiled bitterly. That's probably a cultivator who entered the barrier for the first time. The magic boat can still resist some of the suction force. You'll understand when you look at the lotus platform. Whoosh, tens of kilometers away, they saw that cultivator disappear together with the lotus platform. Demon King, that should be the second node up ahead, Desolation's Demon Shadow reminded. If we continue forward, we'll be teleported out, which means we'll reach the half-returned star. Suemo had a sudden thought and wanted to stop the demonic boat completely. However, the magic boat still did not listen to her. It was still heading in the direction of the half-returned star at a certain speed. Sumo raised an eyebrow and then thought of something. Whoosh, she put away the magic boat. In the vast starry sky, Suemo, Yuluo, and Yi Wuhui all stopped in their tracks. With their cultivation, they could travel through the galaxy. It was just that it would save time and effort if they used magic treasures. The three of them stopped in their tracks. However, they were at a loss, because as far as they could see, and even with their divine senses, there was only the half-returned star in the distance. Everything around them was dark, and they could not see the end. In fact, it was an extremely terrifying and depressing scene. The galaxy was empty, and there was no end to it. Only one star was shining, but that was not the place you wanted to go. Sumo raised an eyebrow, then patted his storage bag. In his storage bag, there were still the secret treasures that seventh senior sister had left for him, but he had not used them. Many of them were magic treasures used to form arrays. In the past, Sumo had thought that these magic treasures were not of high grades. However, when he became a venerable again, he suddenly discovered that some of these magic treasures had improved. There was no lianbua among them, but there were a few venerable divine weapons. Whoosh! At this time, Sumo directly took out 7 flags. The 7 flags were of different colors, and there were strange runes on them. Those runes were not Sumo's runes, but those left behind by seventh senior sister. These flags could only be used in conjunction with the wind wheel technique. Then, Sumo performed a hand seal with both hands. The 7 flags flew into the air and positioned themselves in a unique position in the air. Suddenly, light soared into the sky and connected with each other. 7 rainbows flew across the surroundings. 5 of them were outside and 2 of them were inside. Yuluo and Yiwuhui saw everything, but they couldn't see the profound meaning behind it. However, in an instant they discovered that this part of the starry sky was different from before. Through the rainbow bridges they saw a different world. The faint purple half-returned star disappeared, and what appeared in front of them was an incomparably bright world. The sky was filled with colorful stars. Sumo, we can see the Kuan butterfly star ocean. Yulu and Yiwuhui exclaimed at the same time. Sumo, meanwhile, Yiwuhui turned around, and his expression changed drastically. That was because Sumo had disappeared. The 7 rainbow bridges had completely disappeared. Chapter 856. Sumo had disappeared. Yuluo and Yiwuhui's expressions changed instantly. At that moment, a door of light suddenly lit up in front of them. Their figures involuntarily flew into the door of light. Just now, the incomparably resplendent world in their eyes suddenly brightened up. Everything became more real. An extremely gentle voice sounded in their ears. Congratulations on arriving at the Kuan Butterfly Star Ocean. Kuan Butterfly Star Ocean? Yuluo and Yiwuhui could not help but look at each other. They had actually passed through the barrier and entered the Kuan Butterfly Star Ocean. But where was Sumo? Why did Sumo not come in? However, there was no one around who could answer their questions. The voice just now seemed to be just a setting, not a real cultivator. No. Yiwuhui raised an eyebrow. I have to go back and find Sumo. With that, Yiwuhui had already turned around. However, when she turned around, her eyes instantly fell into a daze. This was because the door of light just now had completely disappeared. Behind them was also a resplendent black sea. Of course, Yuluo was willing to accompany Yiwuhui out. However, there was no path behind them. Sumo! Sumo! Yiwuhui shouted loudly and at the same time spread out his divine sense. Yuluo also spread out her divine sense. However, there was no trace of Sumo's aura within 1,000,000 miles. The Demon King should be blocked outside the barrier. At that moment the Shadow of Desolation said, "We are now in 2 different worlds. Then how do we go back?" Yiwuhui looked anxious. Everything she did was for Sumo. If Sumo was not here, why did she come to the Kuan Butterfly Star Ocean? This? Yuluo and the Shadow of Desolation did not know what to do. No. If I can't find Sumo, I won't go anywhere. Yiwuhui stood still and frowned. We must find her. Yuluo, you know that I reforged my body so that I could accompany Sumo. Yes. Yuluo nodded. Yuluo and the Shadow of Desolation naturally wanted to find Sumo as well. However, in the Kuan Butterfly Star Ocean, they had no idea what to do. Suddenly, a ripple appeared in the void. When they looked again, they saw a strange spell formation not far away from them. 3 cultivators gradually appeared within the magic array. There were 3 female cultivators, and the one in the lead had a slender figure and was graceful and elegant. She was wearing a colorful dress. Her arms were exposed, and her skin was as white as snow. However, it did not give off the slightest feeling of temptation. Instead, it made people not dare to have any evil thoughts. That female cultivator's temperament was very different. The strangest thing was that there was a pair of 5 colored wings on her back. Those wings were like the wings of a butterfly. They were rather large, but they were as thin as a cicada's wings and were sparkling and translucent. Behind her were 2 maids. Looking at their age, they were only 16 or 17 years old. They were lovely and charming. One of them was holding an ancient palm leaf fan, while the other was holding a 9 dragons immortal sword. Both of them were 6th layer eternal nascent soul cultivators. This was no ordinary display. Unfortunately, Yu Luo and Yi Wuhui had never seen Ling Yu and Gu Xing's display. The Lotus Warriors were their children. 9th layer martial supremacy. Kuan butterfly supremacy. Yu Luo could tell the cultivation realm of the leading female cultivator with a single glance. Moreover, the pair of butterfly-like wings was definitely a symbol of her status. The Kuan butterfly clan was the most unique existence among the monster race. They were born in human form, but when their cultivation reached a certain level, they would grow wings. However, those wings weren't the wings of a bird, but the wings of an insect. The pair of wings was no ordinary wings. It was said that the Kuan butterfly clan could use extremely powerful spells with their wings, and they would usually hide their abilities. This time, the female supremacy had purposely revealed her wings to show off her identity. Some people said that the Kuan butterfly's true form was that of a butterfly. However, that was all speculation. In fact, apart from the pure Kuan butterfly clan, no one knew what their origin was. This was also one of the mysteries of the Prajna realm. Ladies, sorry to keep you waiting. The colorful clothed female cultivator nodded at Yu Luo and Yi Wuhui with a smile. Who are you? Yu Luo asked. I'm the Kuan butterfly mystic realm's supremacy, Kuan Wuying. I'm here to invite you 2 ladies under the order of my king. Please come to the Kuan butterfly celestial palace for a chat. Kuan Wuying's voice was very pleasant to the ear. That voice seemed to have an invisible magic power, causing people to have an indescribable good impression and trust towards it. Kuan butterfly mystic realm? Kuan butterfly celestial palace? Yu Luo looked at Yi Wuhui. Yi Wuhui shook her head. She had never heard of these 2 places. The Kuan butterfly mystic realm is the center of the Kuan butterfly star ocean. There are countless celestial palaces in it, and it's the Kuan butterfly celestial palace. The Kuan butterfly clan has been cultivating there for generations. You 2 will know once you get there, Kuan Wuying explained patiently. Sumo, is she there? Yi Wuhui asked. Ha ha! Kuan Wuying smiled. Don't worry, Miss Yi. The Demon King is still outside the Star Ocean, but he will go to the Kuan Butterfly Palace sooner or later. Although he's not there, the person he's looking for is in the Kuan Butterfly Palace. Since Kuan Wuying could call Yi Wuhui by name, it seemed that they had already grasped the situation of Sumo and the other 2. Sister Wu is in the Kuan Butterfly Palace? Yi Wuhui asked. Kuan Wuying did not answer Yi Wuhui's question directly. Instead, he smiled and said, You 2 will understand many things once you get there. Don't worry, the Kuan Butterfly clan has no ill intentions towards you. The Demon King is just staying in the barrier for a few more days. Just follow me to the mystic realm and wait for a few days. Although Kuan Wuying said so, how could Yu Luo and Yi Wuhui believe him so easily? Yu Luo looked at Yi Wuhui. Although Yi Wuhui's realm was not as high as Yu Luo's, Yu Luo still wanted to follow Yi Wuhui's decision when Sumo was not around. Yi Wuhui naturally wanted to see Sumo. Therefore, she did not say anything. Ha ha! Kuan Wuying saw that the 2 did not express their stance, so he said, you two really can rest assured. To be honest, if the Kuan Butterfly clan wants to harm you in the Kuan Butterfly Galaxy, there's no need to beat around the bush. I Wu Ying can capture you all by myself. Huh! Yu Luo raised an eyebrow when she heard that. The shadow under Yi Wuhui's feet also began to fluctuate. You two don't have to worry. I'm just speaking the truth. I have absolutely no intention of taking action against you two. Kuan Wuying looked at Yu Luo and Yi Wuhui, then looked at the shadow under Yi Wuhui's feet. Based on your cultivation, even if you have a few Lianbo pieces and the demon shadow, you are definitely not my match. I want you to understand that the Kuan Butterfly clan has no ill intentions. Otherwise, there's no need to go through so much trouble. Yi Wuhui frowned. One must know that at Sacred Peacock Mountain, the 8th stage realm Patriarch Peacock had not been able to discover the desolate demon shadow. But this Kuan Wuying actually pointed it out. Actually, if you don't go with me, you can only wander around in the vast galaxy to search, and it will not be easy to meet the Demon King. The Demon King's aim is to find the Plum Blossom Sprite. Isn't that so? I think that waiting in the Kuan Butterfly Mystic Realm is the best choice for you. Alright, we'll go with you. Yi Wuhui weighed the pros and cons and finally nodded. At this moment, Sumo was looking around in a daze. Because she had just set up the array, but Yu Luo and Yi Wuhui had disappeared. Chapter 857. He looked around blankly. At that moment, Sumo was also at a loss. He did not see any dazzling sea of stars. There were only a few flags and rainbows in front of him. He stood still. The light-colored star in the distance, the half-returning star, disappeared from his sight. Yu Luo and Yi Wuhui also disappeared. Everything happened almost at the same time. Sumo did not hear Yi Wuhui's last words about seeing the Kuan Butterfly Star sea. To Sumo, Yu Luo and Yi Wuhui disappeared without a trace. However, he was much calmer than Yu Luo and Yi Wuhui. There was no risk of death in the Kuan Butterfly barrier. So, either they were teleported away again, or they had already passed through the barrier. No matter which result it was, Sumo would be able to accept it. As long as they were not in danger of dying, it was fine. Sumo was still thinking about how to break through the barrier. The 7 flags fluttered even though there was no wind. Sumo calmed himself down. At this moment, the 7 flags had already formed a small world inside the Kuan Butterfly barrier. At least, Sumo would not be affected by the spatial gravitational force and illusions for a short period of time. The surroundings were empty. There was not a single star. Sumo sat cross-legged in the middle of the 7 flags and thought about countermeasures. The array formation that 7th senior sister taught him was ever-changing and mysterious. However, Sumo did not know how to deal with it. He entered a meditative state. A faint glow emitted from Sumo's body. In the universe, he was like a cultivator in white who cultivated hard. There was nothing around him except for the 7 flags. At this moment, if someone looked at Sumo from another time and space, they would see that Sumo had created a barrier inside the Kuan Butterfly barrier. Actually, it was not easy for a supremacy. This was because the upper limit of the Kuan Butterfly barrier could stop all cultivators below the 3rd stage of the Lotus Realm, and Sumo was only a 3rd stage supremacy. His cultivation level was very low. However, it was already extremely rare for Sumo to be able to create her own realm within the Kuan Butterfly barrier. At this time, a woman was standing in the void outside the Kuan Butterfly Star Sea. Unfortunately, Sumo couldn't see her. The female cultivator's clothes were very simple, but her appearance was extremely beautiful. The most special thing was that there was actually a hatchet hanging on her waist. It was dark and lusterless. The hilt of the saber was wrapped in a yellowish-white cloth, and there was a chip on the blade. That woman was none other than the woman from the mountain tribe that Sumo and the others had finally settled on. At this moment, if the woman was not standing outside the Kuan Dai Star Sea calmly, most people would think that she was a pretty village girl. She was standing at the edge of the Kuin butterfly barrier. It seemed that she knew that with one more step, she would be able to enter the barrier. She looked in Sumo's direction. In fact, Sumo was nearly 300,000 kilometers away from where she was standing. Ordinary people would not be able to see anything at all. However, Sumo, who was sitting with his legs crossed, and the 7 rays of light were clearly reflected in her eyes. A playful smile appeared on the woman's face as she muttered to herself, "The windmill inheritance is indeed powerful. Otherwise, how could a third-layer Martial Highness realm cultivator survive in the Kuin butterfly barrier?" However, you're not Bai Yifeng. I'm afraid you won't be able to get out with your abilities. I'll send you on your way then. It's all up to you now." The woman's lips curled into a smile as she spoke. She took a step forward. In an instant, she disappeared into the Kuin butterfly barrier. Sumo was still meditating. At that moment, he had already lost his sense of time. That was because he could not use his surroundings as a reference. However, 7th Senior Sister's formation inheritance kept surging, churning, and changing in his sea of consciousness. How should I get out of this situation? That was the question that Sumo had been thinking about. Whoosh! Sumo finally began to perform a hand seal. As a matter of fact, Sumo's understanding of Dharma techniques was at the peak of the Martial Highness realm. Now, all he needed to do was to integrate what he knew. Then, he would find a passage. Following Sumo's hand seal, the 7 flags began to move. The flag that was furthest away suddenly flew into the air. It left behind a purple streak of light as it streaked through the air, directly flying over Sumo's head. Following that, a white flag flew into the sky. Its trajectory and the trajectory of the purple flag just now formed a cross. Then, the 3rd flag, the 4th flag, the 5th flag, the 7 flags intertwined with one another and kept changing their positions. The intertwining rays of light were dazzling. Each of 7th Senior Sister's flags was a divine weapon of the Martial Highness realm. Every time they flew, there was a change in the formation. Sumo made a series of hand seals, trying to find a passageway. It was as if he was trying to sort out a clue from a bunch of messy things. It was difficult, extremely difficult. Whoosh, whoosh. Suddenly, Sumo performed another hand seal. Looking again, the 7 flags flew into the air at the same time and gathered above Sumo's head. The 7 flags instantly merged into one and directly turned into a rainbow bridge of 7 colors. The rainbow bridge led into the distance. A space-time bridge. Whoosh, whoosh, the starry sky opened up, and a dazzling sea of stars appeared in front of Sumo. Its form was like a butterfly spreading its wings. Kuin butterfly star ocean? Sumo's eyes lit up and he heaved a sigh of relief. Without 7th Senior Sister's array formation inheritance, he would never be able to walk out of the Kuin butterfly barrier. At this point, his forehead was already covered in sweat. Sumo slowly stood up and stepped onto the rainbow bridge, moving forward step by step. Every step Sumo took was cautious. He was afraid of repeating the same mistake and being teleported to the half-returned star or somewhere else. Therefore, Sumo left some leeway for every step he took. If there were any changes, he was ready to jump back into the soul storage altar. However, he didn't know if he could go back inside the Kuin butterfly barrier. But he was prepared. He walked forward step by step as if he was walking on thin ice. Fortunately, the space-time around him didn't change. What Sumo was worried about didn't happen. In the middle of the rainbow bridge, Sumo felt that he had broken through a water curtain. That feeling came from his divine sense and his physical perception. Whoosh, then it became clear. The dazzling sea of stars appeared in front of him more clearly. The Kuin butterfly star ocean was extremely beautiful. In Sumo's memory, only the 3 realms galaxy could compare. The 2 worlds were really similar. Phew! Sumo once again let out a long breath of impure air. After which, he waved his hand and retrieved the 7 command flags. The Kuin butterfly star ocean. Sumo's eyes lit up, and his heart was filled with eagerness. Although he didn't know where Wu-er was, he had a feeling that he was very close to her. Sumo! Sumo! At this moment, a woman's voice suddenly came from the void. Sumo was taken aback, because it was clearly Yi Wuhui's voice. Miss Yi. Sumo looked in the direction of the voice. She looked again and saw Yi Wuhui not far away, stepping on a shadow. She was overjoyed to see Sumo. She flew over and threw herself into Sumo's arms. Sumo, where were you just now? Yi Wuhui's voice was already tearful. Chapter 858. Samsara of the One Treasury will be updated at 10:00 p.m. today. Please wait for a moment. After the content is updated, please refresh the page to get the latest update. Chapter 859. Sumo was pleasantly surprised to see Yi Wuhui as soon as they entered the Kuan Butterfly Star Ocean. I'm fine. Previously I was trapped in the barrier and I just broke out of it. Sumo patted Yi Wuhui's shoulder to comfort him. Where's Yu Luo? Aren't you together? Yi Wuhui seemed to feel that she was too excited. She couldn't help but blush and let go of Sumo. I don't know. Previously, when you cast that flag spell, I suddenly felt my eyes light up. Then I shouted that I saw a galaxy. But you're gone. I don't know where Yu Luo went. I thought you were together. No. Sumo frowned and shook her head. Yu Luo isn't in the barrier. I also thought that the two of you should be together. It seems like we were separated. Could she have been teleported back to the half-home star? Yi Wuhui asked. That's possible. Sumo nodded. Then should we go back to look for her? It's not safe for her to be alone. Yi Wuhui looked at Sumo and said, But can we come in? Sumo thought for a moment and said, Yu Luo shouldn't be in danger. She is a venerable and has the golden Qilin and many Lianhua to protect her. As long as she doesn't encounter a high-level venerable or lotus warrior, she should be fine. Her life won't be in danger. But, Yi Wuhui wanted to say something but stopped. She wanted to say that they shouldn't look for Wu-er, but she didn't say it. Yes. Then let's look for Sister Wu-er. But where are we going to find her? There are 770 small worlds in the Kuan Butterfly Star Ocean. It's okay. Sumo smiled when she heard Yi Wuhui's words. Then she narrowed her eyes and looked at the Kuan Butterfly Star Ocean in front of them. There's always an end to the Kuan Butterfly Star Ocean. I'll look for each star one by one. I'll definitely find her. Huh. Yi Wuhui bit his lower lip and nodded. Okay. Then I will accompany you. Let's go to the nearest star to take a look. Maybe we can get some useful information, Sumo said calmly. And Yi Wuhui nodded. By the way, how long have you been here? Sumo asked. No idea. Yi Wuhui shook his head. Maybe 3 to 5 days. I've been waiting for you guys to show up. After that, he did not dare to move. Why would I go to the Kuan Butterfly Star Ocean without you? There was some bitterness in Yi Wuhui's voice. Sumo looked at Yi Wuhui and smiled. His smile seemed to have a deeper meaning. Let's go. Sumo didn't say anything else. Instead, she waved her hand and summoned the demonic boat. The two of them boarded the demonic boat and headed straight for the nearest star. Although it was the closest, it was still 3 to 4 million kilometers away. Originally, it was just a dim starlight. Only after entering did they gradually see the outline of the star. It looked like a star about the size of the half-returning star. However, it was blue, not purple. The entire star was shrouded in a faint mist. It looked like a dream. Sumo and Yi Wuhui landed in a valley on that star. The scenery of that star was extremely beautiful. The abundance of spirit qi in this valley was definitely not something that a half-returning star could compare to. The Kuan Butterfly Star Ocean lives up to its name. Yi Wuhui sighed sincerely. Sumo also nodded slightly. At the same time, Sumo spread his divine sense. He wanted to explore this star. However, he found that his divine sense could only spread less than 3 kilometers. 3 kilometers? This was almost the limit of a second or third stage Qi refinement cultivator's divine sense. However, this was the situation Sumo was in. He could not help but frown secretly. Sumo, my divine sense is restricted. At this time, Yi Wuhui also said. At the same time, the shadow under her feet spread out, but it could not extend more than 3 kilometers. It's the same for Yao Ying. Yi Wuhui frowned. This star is not ordinary. Su Emo sneered. Although our realms have not been suppressed, our spiritual consciousnesses have been suppressed. It's okay. Yi Wuhui waved one hand. 3 flying puppets appeared in the air. Disperse. Yi Wuhui shouted lightly, and looked at the 3 birds flying directly in 3 different directions. Sumo looked up at the 3 birds and did not speak. The 3 puppet birds should be able to explore the surrounding area of 30,000 kilometers. Unfortunately, he could only wait for them to fly back, because Yi Wuhui's divine sense could no longer communicate with them. I hope they will be able to gain something, Sumo said, and Yi Wuhui looked around. In a part of the valley there was a purple bamboo forest. The bamboo forest was lush, and the wind blew the leaves, rustling. Sumo, there seems to be a house in the depths of the bamboo forest. Yi Wuhui pointed to the depths of the bamboo forest. There seemed to be a house there. Sumo had been thinking about other things. At this time, hearing Yi Wuhui's words, she looked in the direction of Yi Wuhui's finger, and sure enough, there was a bamboo house in the depths of the bamboo forest. Let's go. Let's go see. Sumo was in front, and Yi Wuhui followed closely. The two entered the bamboo forest. The bamboo forest was not too deep, and after walking for less than 50 meters, they had already arrived in front of the thatched house. There were 3 bamboo houses, and there was a bamboo fence outside. Simple and elegant. This seemed to be the center of the bamboo forest. There was an open space with a radius of more than 10 meters. Is there anyone? Sumo asked in a clear voice. In fact, when his divine sense swept across, there was no one in the bamboo house. But, to be safe, he still shouted twice. What Sumo did not expect was that as soon as his voice fell, someone responded. Coming. An old voice came from inside the bamboo house. Looking again, the door of one of the bamboo houses opened, and a white-haired, hunchbacked old man walked out. In one of his hands was a copper wine pot that was glistening with a green radiance, and in the other hand was a clean white rag. At that moment, Sumo's eyes narrowed slightly, but soon returned to normal. That white-haired, hunchbacked old man said to Sumo and Yi Wuhui with a smile, "Guests, do you want to drink?" Huh! Sumo was stunned. Then, he looked up, and found that there was a bamboo pole standing in the fenced courtyard, and there was a wine sign hanging on it. On the wine sign there was an ancient seal character, wine. Just now, he actually did not see it. But, in this deep mountain bamboo forest, who would drink? Drink! Sumo thought in his heart, but his expression was natural. Good. Both of you, please come in. The white-haired, hunchbacked old man enthusiastically opened the bamboo fence door, and then invited the 2 of them into the upper house. That bamboo house was not big, but it was somewhat shady. Inside the house there were 3 tables, and there were no other people, but there were many wine jars. The strangest thing was, in the corner of that bamboo house, there was actually a fire burning fiercely. Yi Wuhui looked at the fire, and then looked at Sumo, his eyes showing a look of surprise. I'm old, and when the weather is cold, I feel uncomfortable. Light a fire, and keep warm. 2 guests, please don't blame me. That old man wiped the copper pot in his hand again. When Yi Wuhui heard that, he secretly stuck out his tongue. This explanation sounded a little far-fetched, because it was, after all, summer. No harm. Sumo listened, but laughed, and then said to that white-haired old man, "Sir, serve the wine." Chapter 860. Sir, serve the wine. Sumo's mood seemed to suddenly rise, and she was quite happy. Yi Wuhui smiled and sat at the side. Okay. Although the white-haired old man was hunched, his hands and feet were very agile. He put down the copper pot and the rag, and directly placed a jar of wine on Sumo's table. That jar was at least 10 caddies. Then, the old man went to the back room and took 2 side dishes, as well as bowls and chopsticks. 2 guests, please enjoy. The white-haired old man said, this side dish is free. Old man, I only accept money for the wine. This is my homebrewed wine, it can't be found anywhere else. Thank you, old man. Sumo opened the clay seal. In an instant, the fragrance of the wine spread, refreshing the mind. What a fragrant wine! Yi Wuhui also praised. Sumo filled a bowl for herself and Yi Wuhui. Come. Sumo raised her cup to Yi Wuhui. It's been a long journey, let's take a rest here, don't worry about other things for the time being. Good. Yi Wuhui heard this and also became interested. Pa. The 2 people very heroically clinked their wine bowls, and then each raised their head and drank. Yi Wuhui drank very quickly, and then couldn't help but praise, hey, good wine. Sumo's wine bowl didn't fall quickly. He seemed to drink very slowly. Sumo's throat moved, drinking slowly but without emotion. That bowl of wine seemed to be endless. At this time, Yi Wuhui couldn't see Sumo's expression. That kind of expression was actually a kind of intoxicated pain. He didn't seem to be drinking the wine, but the bitter soup of forgetfulness. It was unclear. Good wine. Sigh. Sumo finally put down the wine bowl, and then actually let out a comfortable long sigh, her expression extremely satisfied. How is it? The white-haired old man sat behind a simple counter and began to wipe the copper pot. This old man isn't lying, right? I often have guests from afar coming here just for a bowl of this old man's wine. I'm not lying. Sumo smiled and said, Sir, what is this place called? What kind of people usually come here to drink? This place has a circumference of 300 li and is called the Zishu Valley. There are a few immortal sects nearby. Usually, there are some people who can fly into the sky and burrow into the earth. They come here to drink, said the white-haired elder. However, I'm not sure of the specifics. Sumo said, Sir, a mortal like you can actually make wine for them? Besides, aren't you curious about the lives of those cultivators? The white-haired old man said, In the beginning, I was curious as well. But now it was a common sight. Mortals and immortals had their own ways of living. However, they gave me some immortal medicines and said that I can live for 900 years. I feel that they just can't bear to part with my wine. You have a secret recipe for this wine, right? Yi Wuhui smiled and said. It's the same recipe, but it depends on who brewed it. The white-haired old man said, I once gave them the recipe, but they couldn't brew it with that taste. So, they still have to come here. Sir, how old are you? Sumo asked. I don't remember. The white-haired old man shook his head. If it's not 300, it's 400. Sir, you're blessed. You're immortal, yet you're stained with immortal qi. Yi Wuhui said as he ate. It seemed that the side dish tasted pretty good. Sir, do you know what kind of small world this is? Sumo asked again. What kind of small world? The old man was stunned, as if he didn't understand Sumo's question. Usually, how do those cultivators who come to drink call this continent or the stars? It's a larger area than the Zishu Valley. Yi Wuhui wanted the old man to understand, so he tried to explain. I think it's Yellow Millet Star. The white-haired old man said. I heard those cultivators talk about this name on a daily basis. Yellow Millet Star. Nank Continent. Right. That's right. Yellow Millet Star, Nank Continent. Yellow Millet Star, Nank Continent. When Sumo heard that, she couldn't help but laugh. Good name. You two are also immortals, right? The old man said, ordinary mortals wouldn't be able to find me here. And we're cultivators too. Sumo said, we're looking for cultivators from the Kuan butterfly race, and then looking for a person. Kuan butterfly race. The white-haired old man shook his head. Never heard of it. However, if you're not in a hurry, you might meet those cultivators who drink here. They might know. And there's no hurry. Suemo nodded. Then, Sumo filled a bowl of wine for herself and Yi Wuhui. Come. Sumo raised her cup towards Yi Wuhui. Yi Wuhui smiled and clinked wine cups with Sumo. Of course, she was willing to drink with Sumo. Actually, as long as she was with Sumo, she was willing to do anything. Hiss, ha! Yi Wuhui drank another bowl, then smacked his lips. This wine has a lingering aftertaste, but the second bowl is slightly bitter. Taste it carefully, Sumo said with a smile. And it seems to be a bit sweet. Yi Wuhui frowned. Hee, that's right. My wine is bitter first, then sweet. It's the end of life, the white-haired old man said. Although I ate an immortal pill and extended my lifespan, I still feel that life is like morning dew. However, he still felt that life was like morning dew, fleeting in an instant. In this life, the best arrangement is to have bitterness first, then sweetness. Only bitterness, no sweetness. Only sweetness, no bitterness. Only sweetness, no bitterness, why not? Yi Wuhui asked doubtfully. Only sweetness, no bitterness, how would you know what sweetness is? The old man looked at Yi Wuhui and smiled benevolently. Miss, after eating honey for a long time, you won't feel that honey is sweet anymore. Right? In this life, it's not a good thing to be too smooth sailing. Yi Wuhui nodded obediently. Sir, I've learned something. Sumo listened and nodded. Then, she picked up the bowl of wine and carefully tasted it. Actually, he didn't need to taste it. That taste was originally in the depths of his soul. It's just that the feeling of holding the bowl of wine and looking at the old man was a bit different. Yi Wuhui also silently drank a mouthful, seemingly savoring it. Sir, are you the only one managing this small hotel? Sumo suddenly asked. No. The white-haired old man smiled. I still have a granddaughter. But this morning, she went to the mountains to chop firewood and pick bamboo shoot. Usually, she only comes back at night. Sumo smiled faintly and nodded. In just a moment, Sumo and Yi Wuhui felt that the room had become much darker. Yi Wuhui raised his head and couldn't help but frown. The sky seemed to have changed a bit too quickly. Sumo, on the other hand, was calmly drinking and eating. It gets dark early in the Zishu Valley. The white-haired old man sighed. And sometimes I don't know why. The sky is always changing. I'm used to it. As the white-haired old man spoke, he couldn't help but push open the door and look around. It seemed that he was also somewhat concerned about his granddaughter. Through the door, Sumo saw that the wine stall in the courtyard was already suffused with a light purple brilliance. That was not an ordinary wine stall. That wine stall could suppress evil and eliminate demons. It was a treasure. Sumo, it seems that the 3 puppet birds won't be coming back soon tonight. Yi Wuhui sighed. Who knew that it would get dark so early here? The puppet birds will be affected at night. The point is, I can't contact them now. Yes. One more night won't make a difference. Sumo said. It's all right. When the white-haired old man heard that, he couldn't help but say, there's an empty room next to it. If you two don't mind, you can spend the night there. When Yi Wuhui heard that, he couldn't help but blush, but his heart felt sweet. Chapter 861. The white-haired old man's words caused a ripple in Yi Wuhui's heart. She had been with Sumo for a long time. They had been together day and night in the cave abode in the soul-storing altar. However, most of the time, she was just a soul and did not have a physical body. Moreover, when the words couple came out of the white-haired old man's mouth, it naturally sounded different. Moreover, this was not a cave abode, but a mortal's bamboo house. Yi Wuhui's heart was slightly warm. Then, she hurriedly picked up the wine and took a sip. At the same time, she stole a glance at Sumo. On the other hand, Sumo's expression was calm. There were no unnecessary changes on her face. She was only carefully tasting the wine. "If that's the case, then I'll have to trouble you, sir," Sumo said with a smile. Suemo took out a pill from his storage pouch and handed it to the old man. "Sir, this is an immortal pill, its quality is passable. Similarly, it can prolong one's life and strengthen one's body. I'll use it to pay for the lodging. I'll pay for the wine tomorrow." "Little brother, you're too kind. This pill is enough to pay for the wine," the old man said with a smile. At the same time, he did not refuse. He directly took the immortal pill from Sumo and put it in his pocket. It seemed that he had come into contact with many things of cultivators and was not surprised at all. The sky became darker and the wind gradually rose. The rustling sound of the bamboo forest lingered on, but it was quite rhythmic. "The wind is rising." The white-haired old man let out a long sigh. At this moment, a dot of light gradually appeared from the depths of the bamboo forest. It was also a faint purple light. When the white-haired old man saw that dot of light, his expression finally relaxed, and he showed a smile. It was obvious that that dot of light should be his granddaughter. The jar of wine was quickly drunk by Sumo and Yi Wuhui. Both of them drank to their heart's content. Yi Wuhui's face was flushed, and she looked quite delicate and beautiful. At this moment, a woman carrying a bamboo basket and a lantern walked into the courtyard. "Grandpa, I'm back." The woman's voice was clear and sweet. The white-haired old man had already gone out to welcome them. Sumo and Yi Wuhui also looked out. The woman looked to be 21 or 22 years old. She was tall and had fair skin. Although she was dressed in black, there was a belt around her waist, which showed off her waist. She was extremely beautiful and had a cold and noble aura about her. His appearance and demeanor matched the artistic conception of the bamboo forest quite well. If it weren't for the bamboo basket on her back and her plain clothes, she wouldn't have looked like a woman from the mountains. "That girl is so beautiful," Yi Wuhui said. Sumo didn't say anything. He only looked at the woman, his eyes slightly focused, not saying a word. "Sumo." Yi Wuhui didn't hear Sumo's response, so he couldn't help but glance at Sumo. Then he curled his lips and said with slight annoyance, "Sumo, I'm calling you. What, did you think the girl was pretty? I'm not as good as her?" Ha. Suemo regained his senses and couldn't help but laugh lightly. "Doesn't she look like Sister Wu-er?" Yi Wuhui teased. "But I've seen Sister Wu-er's appearance in your divine sense. This girl isn't like her. She doesn't even look like Mu Hongchen." Yi Wuhui didn't want Sumo to look at other girls, so he could only bring up Wu. Hearing Yi Wuhui's words, Sumo couldn't help but laugh. Now that Yi Wuhui was outside of his divine sense, how could he know what he was thinking? That girl indeed didn't look like Wu or Mu Hongchen, but at this moment, the white-haired old man and the girl in black had already entered the house. Mu-er greets the two guests. The white-haired old man smiled as he introduced them. "Both of you, this is my granddaughter, Mu-er." "Hello." Mu-er greeted Sumo and Yi Wuhui generously. At the same time, she lowered her head and blew out the lantern in her hand. It was a paper lantern, a purple paper lantern. "Hello, Miss Mu." Sumo and Yi Wuhui both nodded at her. "Mu-er, eat something, then clean up the empty house. Both of you will be spending the night here tonight," the white-haired old man said. "Yes, all right. I'll clean up in a while," Mu-er responded, then carried the bamboo basket and went straight into the back room. It seemed like she was a clever and obedient girl. "Old man, is your granddaughter not allowed to be betrothed to someone?" Sumo said. The old man laughed when he heard that. "I want to betroth her to someone. However, her parents had died early. There are very few people in this void valley." Moreover, she has eaten immortal medicine, so mortals don't like her, and cultivators can't match her. So, she and this old man depend on each other. She doesn't want to get married. I can't bear to. The white-haired old man's words were honest. Yes. Sumo nodded and smiled. Depend on each other, very good. With that, Sumo drank the wine in her bowl. After a while, Mu-er walked in. Grandpa, that house is ready. Dear guests, you may go and rest now. Yes. The white-haired old man nodded, then asked Sumo and Yi Wuhui, both of you, yes? Thank you, old man, Miss Mu-er. We're going to rest too. Sumo put down her bowl and stood up. Yi Wuhui naturally put down his bowl and followed behind Sumo with his head lowered. The 3 bamboo houses were adjacent. Their rooms were, in fact, separated by a bamboo hut. Mu-er led them into the house. The house was very spacious, because, other than a big bed, there were only a few bamboo chairs and stools. This place is a little shabby, please don't mind. Mu-er said apologetically, do you need anything else? If not, please rest early. Yes. Sumo looked at Mu-er but didn't say anything else. Gongzi, you, what's the matter? Mu-er blushed slightly under Sumo's gaze. After all, the two of them were very close, and Sumo's appearance was as beautiful as a demon. Nothing. Suemo smiled, then with a pinch of his hand, a spirit talisman appeared. Miss Mu, this talisman is for you. Usually, if you come back late, you can use this to go back home. That way, old man will miss you less. Oh! Mu-er's eyes lit up, really? Thank you, Gongzi. With that, Sumo handed the talisman to Mu. However, when Mu-er took the talisman, Sumo gently held her hand. Yes. Mu-er only felt that Sumo's hand was warm and strong and instantly blushed. Gongzi, Sumo smiled faintly and immediately let go. Miss Mu's hand is a little cold. It's cold at night, you need to wear more clothes. Sumo said calmly. Thank you for your concern. Mu-er withdrew her hand, holding the talisman, blushed and turned to leave. Sumo looked at her back, but her eyes were lonely. Sumo! Yi Wuhui called out bitterly. Originally, she followed behind Sumo to rest like a little wife. However, she didn't expect that Sumo actually touched Mu-er's hand, and even gave her a talisman. What's wrong? Sumo seemed to be a little surprised. Only then did she remember that Yi Wuhui was by her side. Nothing. Yi Wuhui looked unhappy, directly entered the room, and then sat cross-legged on the bamboo bed. The bamboo bed was wide enough for 2 people to sleep on. Yi Wuhui sat cross-legged on one side, obviously leaving a place for Sumo. However, she didn't speak. Sumo smiled, entered the room, and directly began to meditate next to Yi Wuhui. The lights in the room suddenly went out. At that moment, Yi Wuhui's heartbeat suddenly accelerated. Chapter 862. Cultivators at the 3rd level of Qi cultivation had night vision. It was as bright as day in the dark. However, Sumo and Yi Wuhui were in total darkness in this bamboo house. Although Sumo and Yi Wuhui's divine senses were suppressed, it would not be to this extent, unless they were trapped in some kind of formation. However, this was not possible. The old man and Mu-er were definitely not cultivators. It was pitch black inside the house. Outside the window, the bamboo forest was blown by the wind. Sumo, what's wrong? Yi Wuhui asked. Nothing. Sumo did not say anything else. She sat cross-legged and closed her eyes. His breathing was very stable. Sumo turned a blind eye to all these abnormalities. In the darkness, Yi Wuhui pouted. However, she instinctively leaned towards Sumo. She felt safer this way. Women were like this. Actually, with Yi Wuhui's cultivation, she was safe most of the time. After all, it was not easy to meet a venerable. Then, Yi Wuhui also closed his eyes and began to adjust his breathing and meditate. Cultivation was the norm for great cultivators like them. Yi Wuhui was at the 3rd level of Rebirth Realm. She was definitely a cultivator. However, she did not know why she could not enter a meditative state that night. Whenever she closed her eyes, she would see Sumo's shadow. She could not get that devilishly handsome face out of her mind. Her state of mind was in a mess. However, Sumo was clearly by her side, not thousands of miles away. Why was this happening? Was it because of the wine just now? However, Yi Wuhui's tolerance for alcohol was definitely not a problem. Thus, Yi Wuhui secretly adjusted her breathing and calmed her state of mind. Actually, it was as easy as flipping a hand for a rebirth realm cultivator. However, Yi Wuhui became more and more restless. The Sumo in her mind sometimes smiled and sometimes frowned. His every word, action, and every move affected Sumo's heart. Outside the window, the bamboo leaves rustled. Apart from that, there was no other sound between heaven and earth. Everything around him was extremely quiet. It was as if the white-haired old man and Miss Mu had never existed. Gradually, Yi Wuhui felt that she and Sumo were the only ones in this world. Nothing else existed. Sumo! Yi Wuhui called in a low voice. However, Sumo did not reply. He was still sitting peacefully at the side, like a wooden man. In the darkness, Yi Wuhui opened his eyes. Unfortunately, Sumo was right in front of her, but she couldn't see it. However, she could hear Sumo's steady and even breathing. That breathing sound was very rhythmic, and it made Yi Wuhui feel slightly at ease. She was not afraid, but rather a little hot. Yi Wuhui's eyes seemed to be dripping water, rippling like autumn waves. There was a ball of fire in her heart. Then, she gently bit her lower lip, as if she had made up her mind. Then, Yi Wuhui slowly stretched out a hand, and groped for Sumo's hand. At that moment Yi Wuhui couldn't help but let out a deep breath. She was slightly relieved, because Sumo's hand was a little cold, and it calmed her down a little. Sumo! Yi Wuhui faintly called out again. However, Sumo still did not respond. Enemy! Yi Wuhui lightly cursed in his heart, and at the same time, his heart and soul were shaken again. At this moment, Yi Wuhui finally understood that her heart was burning with endless lust. How was this possible? One should know that the stages of a cultivator were not randomly divided. Qi refinement, foundation establishment, core formation, nascent soul, soul transformation, deity tribulation, and undying were the red dust realm. God burying, world breaking, sea extermination, and immortality were the immortal realm. Then, it was the rebirth realm, and the lotus realm. Needless to say, Yi Wuhui was currently at the third rebirth realm. In fact, as long as a cultivator crossed the red dust realm, they could cut off all desires of the red dust realm. It was not that they did not have any desires, but that they were no longer controlled by these desires. They could control the emotions that were not good for them. Yi Wuhui's current situation was definitely not normal. She also understood in her heart. However, she could not control her own desires. Although she tried her best to suppress them, it was useless. They were like a burning ball of fire that could not be extinguished. I've been hit by a spell, Yi Wuhui's last bit of reason told her. However, who was the one who cast the spell, who set it up? That white-haired old man? Yi Wuhui did not have the chance to think clearly. The sea of desire had long drowned her. A woman's voice echoed in her heart. Yi Wuhui, Sumo can be yours. If you love her, then you should have her. He is right by your side. The pavilion closest to the water, your life will not be in vain. Yi Wuhui, are you willing to let him find the plum blossom sprite and leave? Yi Wuhui, this is your chance. He can be your man. Whoosh, those voices were like the waves of the sea, layer upon layer. They constantly eroded Yi Wuhui's soul. At this moment, if someone saw Yi Wuhui's eyes, her eyes would already be scarlet red. In her dance sea, the waves never stopped. Sumo! Sumo! Save me! Save me! Yi Wuhui's breathing was rapid, and she kept calling for Sumo. However, Sumo did not respond at all. At the same time, Yi Wuhui stretched out her arms and hugged Sumo tightly. Sumo's body was cold, but Yi Wuhui's body was hot. Her body was like a snake wrapped around Sumo, young and full of temptation. However, the strange thing was, Sumo was sitting cross-legged on the bed, not moving at all. At that moment, Sumo was like a stone Buddha. Sumo! Yi Wuhui couldn't control herself at all. She kept gasping for breath. However, she did not even know what she was doing, and that was the scariest thing. Her heart's demon occupied her everything. At this moment, in Yi Wuhui's mind, it was completely Sumo's thousands of charming, gentle 10,000 kinds of amorous feelings. Yi Wuhui was completely immersed in it. At the same time, a cultivator stood outside the bamboo house. He was dressed in white, and was as beautiful as a demon. It was Sumo. That Sumo frowned as she looked at Yi Wuhui inside the house. In fact, the bamboo house was still lit with candles, and it was not pitch black at all. Yi Wuhui was alone, rolling on the bamboo bed. Her long hair was loose, and her clothes were messy. At the same time, her expression kept changing. She grabbed with both hands and kept struggling. Actually, a literature museum. Nothing happened. However, Yi Wuhui was in her own illusion, unable to extricate herself. Yi Wuhui's face alternated between red and white. However, Sumo also did not know what kind of struggle she was going through. Because, even now, he could not see through this Yi Wuhui. Was she real or fake? Unknowingly, the white-haired old man who sold the wine was already standing beside Sumo. The white-haired old man asked, "You can't save her?" "Yes." Sumo nodded, "Because I can't see through her background. Everything in front of me, I don't know if it's real or fake." The white-haired old man laughed. "In the illusion, there is another illusion. In the world, there is another world. Since you understand this principle, then what's the point of arguing about real or fake? Let her out of the cage, perhaps you will also be able to get out of the cage." Hearing the white-haired old man's words, Sumo was slightly stunned at first, and then let out a long sigh. "Grandpa, you're right." Whoosh! Suddenly the wind blew, and the white-haired old man instantly disappeared. Chapter 863. Real and Fake, Heaven and Earth Reversed. The white-haired old man disappeared, and Sumo's thoughts moved in an instant. Whoosh! The wind blew, the forest dispersed. In an instant, the entire purple bamboo forest disappeared, and the 3 bamboo houses disappeared without a trace. There was only an empty valley, and there was nothing around. On a blue stone, Yi Wuhui was lying down. Her face was flushed, and her soul was still struggling. However, the redness in her eyes had faded. This was because Sumo had already dispersed the illusions around them. Sumo was no longer in front of her. A moment later, Yi Wuhui's body suddenly shook. All the struggling stopped abruptly. Then, a ball of blue light appeared on her body, and her torn clothes were instantly repaired. Then, she stood up gracefully. At that moment, Sumo's eyes narrowed. That was definitely not Yi Wuhui. "Sumo, do you dislike me that much?" Yi Wuhui gave Sumo a charming and strange smile. Miss Yi is a good person. Unfortunately, you are not." Sumo smiled coldly. "She is in your hands, right? Am I not Yi Wuhui?" Yi Wuhui looked at her with hidden bitterness. "Sumo, I am willing to give you my body. But, why don't you want it? This body of yours is still Miss Yi. Because she is the incarnation of the ancient lotus, and carries the fragrance of the lotus. But you are not her. But you have occupied her soul." Sumo said coldly, "How is she?" If I was the real Yi Wuhui, would you obey me?" Yi Wuhui sneered, and did not answer Sumo's question. "First, Miss Yi wouldn't do that. Second, I, Sumo, only have Wu air in my heart." Sumo said solemnly, "Even if I reincarnate, I won't think about it." Yi Wuhui looked at Sumo and did not say anything for a long time. "Yi Wuhui is fine, don't worry. I borrowed her body, and I will return it to her. The Demon King's words were indeed comforting. However, how would the Demon King know that Miss Yi would not do so? Illusions were born from the mind. If it was someone else, they might not have reacted in such a manner. You should know better than me why Yi Wuhui is always by your side. How do you know that one day, her love won't turn into hate? That's why I used her inner demons to test you. Fortunately, you weren't bewitched. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to stand before me now. Sumo raised her eyebrows. From this fake Yi Wuhui's words, she could hear several layers of meaning. Who are you? Sumo asked. Are you here for Wu Er? I am Yi Wuhui now. Yi Wuhui shook his head. The rest is not important. Demon King, you do have some skills. Windmill's inheritance is also remarkable. You already knew that I wasn't Yi Wuhui. So, you used illusions to resist me and forced me to show myself. It can be said to be brilliant. Now, I want to ask, who are the old man and the lady in the restaurant? That old man is my grandfather, the Supreme Wilderness Emperor Shao Tian. That lady Mu is Wu Er. Sumo said. Wu Er. Yi Wuhui shook his head. No. That's not Wu Er at all. In Yi Wuhui's memory, there is no such woman. Sumo smiled faintly. That's because she has never seen Wu Er's life. What do you mean? Yi Wuhui said. In that life, Wu Er was called Mu Jinghong. She was my guide in this life. That year, her divine soul reincarnated into Mu Jinghong. So, I named her Mu Er. Sumo sighed. A close relative and a true love. Not bad. Yi Wuhui's mouth curved and then he nodded. You created them to remind yourself to keep your divine soul awake. It's not easy. No wonder you are infatuated with that Lady Mu. That's because you are strengthening your heart. It seems that you are already prepared for Yi Wuhui's inner demons. A demon is a demon. Sumo said. Sumo will not fall in love with a demon. Very good. Yi Wuhui smiled. Yellow Millet Star, Nank Continent, Zishu Valley. These names are interesting. If it's not a dream, then it doesn't exist. Demon King, you are hinting to me that you already knew that this is a dream. Sumo nodded, but she still sighed. Unfortunately, your realm is far above mine. I can only see through it, but I can't really rush out of this dream. You are a cultivator of the Kuan Butterfly clan? Sumo asked. Yi Wuhui laughed. Demon King, who I am is not important. Right now, what's important is that you passed my first test. Congratulations. What do you mean? Sumo asked. After passing all the tests, you will be able to see the Plum Blossom Fairy. Yi Wuhui smiled faintly. Where is she? Sumo asked again. Whoosh, however, just as Sumo said that. Looking again, Yi Wuhui waved his hands, sweeping up the void. Suddenly, she turned into countless blue butterflies, and then dissipated in the empty valley. Sumo looked at the butterflies, frowning. Because, although the fake Yi Wuhui dissipated, the valley did not change, and the star did not disappear. However, the valley did not change, and the star did not disappear. What kind of powerful spell was that? At this moment, Sumo understood. This might be a world that the woman just now created for herself. Then, did she enter the Kuan Butterfly Star Ocean? Sumo was also not sure. Yellow Millet Star, Nank Continent. Sumo smiled bitterly in her heart. That was a name she made up. But now, it seems like even the name of this star. Although the female cultivator borrowed Yi Wuhui's body, and did not admit that she was a cultivator of the Kuan butterfly race, Sumo felt that it must be related to the Kuan butterfly race, and related to Wu Er. You are one step closer to the Plum Blossom Fairy. The woman's words gave Sumo the greatest motivation. This was a trap or a test. Sumo was not afraid of any of this. But if he succeeded, he should be able to see Wu Er. There was nothing more worth looking forward to than this. Sumo looked up and looked around. The puppet bird that Yi Wuhui released earlier naturally would not return. His divine sense was still limited to within 3 miles. Thus, Sumo walked out of the valley step by step. At this time, in a bedroom in the Kuan butterfly mystic realm, Yi Wuhui was waking up from a midnight dream. Her cheeks were red, her forehead was covered with sweat, and her eyes were filled with endless shyness, because she actually had such an incomparably realistic and charming dream. How could she have such a dream? Yi Wuhui did not dare to recall that dream because she was really ashamed. She would never do such a thing. Sumo, I hope you are safe. Yi Wuhui calmed down, then bit his lower lip and whispered to himself, as long as you are reunited with Sister Wu-Er, I will definitely not be a trouble for you. I don't ask for your presence, I only ask for your safety. Outside the window there was actually a female cultivator standing. On her waist there was a hatchet. She looked at Yi Wuhui and let out a long sigh. Silly child, I expected you to wake up from your dream. Demon King, I have my own place to go. After saying that, the female cultivator turned around and disappeared from the Kuan butterfly mystic realm. Chapter 864. Yellow Millet Star, Nank Continent. At this moment, Sumo had already left the Zishu Valley. However, his divine sense did not recover. He still could not see through everything around him. However, this must be a lotus scholar's trap. Sumo walked forward slowly and did not ride the wind. This was because he understood that in such a deliberately created world, many of his spells would become meaningless. When a cultivator reached the venerable realm, they could recreate the world. Moreover, the one who set up this trap was a lotus scholar. Therefore, Sumo understood that although the world in front of him was called Yellow Millet, as long as the person who set up the trap thought about it, it could turn the illusion into reality. There was no boundary between true and false here. When the false reached the true became false, and when the true reached the false became true. All of that depended on the person who set up the trap. Therefore, Sumo could only keep his heart unchanged in order to deal with all kinds of situations that might appear at any time. After leaving the Zishu Valley, there was still a huge mountain in front of him. Fortunately, there was a road on the mountain. Sumo followed the mountain road and walked forward. His divine sense could spread out for 3 miles. This distance was better than nothing for the current Sumo. Within 3 miles there was almost nothing special. The mountain was the real mountain, the tree was the real tree. There was nothing unusual about them. The scenery here was real. Sumo didn't have a clear goal as he moved forward. However, he knew that he was in someone else's cage now. Even if he did not look for trouble, trouble would find him. After crossing the mountain, everything in front of him suddenly became clear. At the foot of the mountain, a large river flowed from west to east. On both sides of the river there was a dense forest. The ancient trees towered into the sky, and the green was boundless. Sumo narrowed his eyes. There seemed to be a large group of buildings in the upper reaches of the river. Hee. Sumo looked at the group of buildings and could not help but smile. He had a premonition that his second test might be coming. Along the mountain road, Sumo went down the mountain, then followed the large river and went straight upstream. When Sumo was halfway up the mountain, it was still sunny. However, when he reached the foot of the mountain, the sky changed color. Although the sky was basically still clear, a cloud came over, and suddenly it began to rain. The rain was neither heavy nor light, but it was very heavy. Half the day was bright and the other half was rainy. There was a yin-yang fish in the sky, which looked very interesting. However, Sumo did not need to care about that kind of rain at all. All the raindrops automatically dispersed 3 feet in front of Sumo. At the same time, Sumo patted her storage pouch and the little white pig jumped out. Humph! When the little white pig saw that it was raining, he was very happy. With a flap of his silver wings, he flew out. The rain was perfect for it to play. Be careful, don't go too far, Sumo reminded. He released the little white pig not just to let it play, but because the little fellow was born with a strong spiritual sense. In such a special place, the little white pig might be of help. Humph! The little white pig snorted, and then flew 3 miles away in the blink of an eye. It did not hear Sumo's instructions at all, or perhaps it heard it and directly forgot about it. Sumo smiled bitterly and ignored it. He believed that the little fellow would definitely be fine. He continued to walk forward. At that moment, from a fork in the hillside, 2 figures walked over. It was a middle-aged scholar, and he was accompanied by an 11 or 12-year-old boy. Sumo could not help but be stunned. Those 2 people were not figures he had conjured, but had existed in this world to begin with. The middle-aged scholar was dressed in green, was thin, and looked slightly tired. However, his eyes were clear and extremely spirited. And the young boy had red lips and white teeth, very beautiful, like a child immortal. The 2 had just come down from the mountain. Previously, Sumo did not notice them. The middle-aged scholar wore a pair of straw sandals, one hand holding a cane, and let the heavy rain fall on his body. His green clothes were already half wet. However, his expression was calm, as if he did not notice it at all. And the young boy was wearing a straw rain cape and a bamboo hat. Only when he raised his head could others see his face. "Sir, you're almost drenched," the young boy said. "It's fine." The middle-aged scholar smiled. "This rain came at the right time. I can use it to wash away the filth on my body. This is, after all, the essence of heaven and earth." "Sir, you are a great cultivator. How could you have filth?" the young boy said. "Ha ha! Who said that great cultivators don't have filth?" The middle-aged cultivator laughed. "Cultivation has always been something that goes against the heavens. In fact, the greater the cultivation, the more filth there is. Therefore, we must often dispel distracting thought. Sometimes, it is some mortals who are clear-minded and pure." "Oh!" The young boy raised his head and frowned. "If that's the case, wouldn't newborn babies be the cleanest?" That's right." The middle-aged scholar nodded. "That is the purest soul." "Sir, if we are inferior to mortals, why do we still cultivate?" the young boy asked. "Because we want to do things that mortals can't do." The middle-aged scholar's smile disappeared, and he sighed slightly. "We need power, the power to change everything. Isn't that right?" "Yes." The young boy seemed to understand, but he still nodded firmly. Their relationship was like master and servant, but also not like master and servant. However, the relationship between the 2 of them must be extremely close. Listening to their conversation, Sumo also nodded slightly. Because what the middle-aged scholar said actually made a lot of sense. However, Sumo couldn't see through the middle-aged scholar's cultivation. At this moment, the middle-aged scholar and the young boy also saw Sumo. "Hello, sir." Sumo took 2 steps forward, and then bowed to the middle-aged scholar. "Oh!" The middle-aged scholar was also surprised, as if he didn't expect to meet other people here, but he immediately returned the greeting with a smile. "Hello, young master." "Excuse me, sir, is there a manor in front?" "What is that place?" Sumo asked. "There is indeed a manor in front, called Floating Spirit Manor." The middle-aged scholar looked at the upstream of the river and said, "Young master, where are you going?" "Yes." Sumo nodded. "To tell you the truth, I'm an itinerant cultivator, and I'm a little lost here. I want to go to that manor, ask for directions, and understand the customs here." "Ha! That's good." The middle-aged scholar nodded and said, "The 2 of us, master and servant, are also going to that manor, so we're going the same way." "Good. Then I'll have to trouble you, sir." Sumo cupped her hands again. At the same time, he also nodded to the young boy. Unfortunately, the young boy seemed to be a little shy. After glancing at Sumo, he lowered his head and hid behind the middle-aged scholar. Sumo didn't mind. Thus, the 3 of them went straight to the manor. "Sir, are you from that manor?" Sumo asked as they walked. "That's right." The middle-aged scholar nodded and said, "I'm the sir of that manor, and behind me is my young master. We were traveling outside and just returned." Hearing this, Sumo was stunned again. Chapter 865. Returning from a trip? Sumo could not help but ask, "May I ask, where did you go to travel? What continent and star are we on?" "This star is called Yellow Millet." The middle-aged scholar spoke frankly with assurance. "The entire Yellow Millet star has 2 continents. One is called Nank and the other is Jiaolu. Between the 2 continents there is a great river called Cloud Fantasy. We just returned from the Jiaolu continent." "Jiaolu? Cloud Fantasy?" Hearing these names, Sumo smiled bitterly in her heart. It seemed like the Lotus Warrior who set up the layout had completely adopted the names she had given the stars and continent. Moreover, the names Floating Spirit and Cloud Fantasy all represented illusory and ethereal meanings. Interesting. Sumo looked at the middle-aged scholar and the youth and secretly marveled. The Lotus Warrior who set up the layout was really impressive. "May I know your name, young master?" the middle-aged scholar asked. "I am Sumo," Sumo said. "Young Master Su, I see that you are also a grand cultivator. Where are you going?" the middle-aged scholar asked Sumo as the 3 of them chatted. "I am going to find someone. Unfortunately, I still don't know where she is," Sumo said in a disappointed tone. The middle-aged scholar smiled. "Young master, who are you looking for? Do you have any clues?" "The person I am looking for is my wife," Sumo said. "She is a plum blossom sprite. She should be sealed in the territory of the Kuan Butterfly clan. However, the Kuan Butterfly Star Ocean has a total of 7,777 stars. I do not know where she is exactly." "The Kuan Butterfly clan." The middle-aged scholar was taken aback. Then, he smiled and said, "That is the overlord of the Kuan Butterfly Star Ocean. How could your wife be in their hands?" "That is a long story, sir. However, I am not very clear about the process." Sumo smiled bitterly. In the center of the Kuan Butterfly Star Ocean is a mystic realm called the Kuan Butterfly Mystic Realm. The middle-aged scholar thought for a moment and said, "If young Master Su's wife is really in the hands of the Kuan Butterfly clan, then she is most likely in the Kuan Butterfly Mystic Realm." "Kuan Butterfly Mystic Realm?" Sumo could not help but raise her eyebrows. "What kind of existence is that?" "It is said that the true Kuan Butterfly clan lives in the Kuan Butterfly Mystic Realm for generations. There were countless immortal palaces in the Kuan Butterfly Mystic Realm. To the cultivators of the Kuan Butterfly Star Realm, it is an absolute holy land." Sumo nodded silently. "Sir, how do I get to the Kuan Butterfly Mystic Realm?" "I don't know." The middle-aged scholar shook his head and smiled. "I haven't been to the Kuan Butterfly Mystic Realm. Anyone who could enter the Kuan Butterfly Mystic Realm had to be recognized by the Kuan Butterfly clan. However, you just have to keep moving forward, and you'll reach it." The middle-aged cultivator uttered a final line of Zen, and said no more. Leaning on his cane, he strode forward in the rain. The young man followed closely. Sumo looked at their backs and did not ask any questions. Instead, she strode forward as well. The Kuan Butterfly Mystic Realm. This was useful information that Sumo had obtained. The rain gradually subsided. The 3 of them had already reached the upper reaches of the river. With someone leading the way, Sumo did not have to think too much. After passing through a forest, they arrived outside a manor. That manor had a radius of about 1.5 kilometers. Sumo's divine perception could basically cover everything. The style of the manor was simple and unadorned, solemn and elegant. The manor's main gate was green. There was a horizontal plaque on the lintel of the gate. The words, "Floating Spirit Manor," were written in gold on a black background. On the left side of the manor's gate, there was an ancient plum tree. Its branches were like horned dragons, ancient and ancient. Its crown was dozens of feet long, and it was extremely beautiful. What a floating spirit manor! What an ancient plum tree! Sumo praised sincerely. Young master, you have good taste. The middle-aged scholar smiled and extended his hand in invitation. Young Master Su, please come in. At that moment, the gate of the manor was already wide open. She looked again and saw a cultivator in white walking out of the manor. Behind him were 2 attendants. The cultivator in white had an extraordinary appearance. His eyes rippled slightly, and it was quite intoxicating. The most special thing was his pair of white eyebrows, which were curved like cold moons. His entire temperament was quite evil and charming. Seeing this cultivator, Sumo's eyes narrowed. In his heart, he let out a long sigh. At the same time, his gaze fell on the middle-aged scholar. One of the middle-aged cultivator's sleeves was empty, because he only had one arm. Young master, Mr. One, you're finally back, the cultivator in white said with a smile. Yes, the banana deer's dream will return one day, Mr. One said with a smile. It's good that you're back, the cultivator in white said with a smile. Young master, how was your trip this time? The cultivator in white looked at the youth again. Thanks to Mr. Lien, it was not bad, the youth replied. Ha ha. Mr. Lien nodded and said, It seems that it was not bad. Young master, you still recognize me? That's a good thing. I was afraid that you would forget your original heart in the reincarnation cycle. Hearing this, Sumo's body could not help but tremble slightly. This is? The white-robed Mr. Lien looked at Sumo again. Sumo greets Mr. Lien. Sumo hurried over and bowed deeply. Young Master Su wants to go to the Kuan Butterfly Mystic Realm to find his wife. However, he got lost in the vicinity. Therefore, I invited him to come to the manor, Mr. One said. The Kuan Butterfly Mystic Realm? Mr. Lien raised his eyebrows and looked deeply at Mr. One. However, he hesitated to speak. The Kuan Butterfly Mystic Realm is not easy to go to, Mr. Lien said lightly to Sumo. I hope that the 2 of you can show me the way. Sumo said. Let's go. We'll talk inside the manor, Mr. One said. Please, Mr. Lien also said. Sumo nodded. Thus, the group entered the floating spirit manor. The entire manor was filled with dense mist, making it look like a fairyland. Mr. One, Mr. Lien, are the 2 of you in charge of the floating spirit manor? Sumo asked tentatively. The others are not here for now. Now it is just the 2 of us, Mr. Lien said. Before young master and Mr. One return, I am the only one in charge. I feel somewhat lonely. When Sumo heard that, she could not help releasing her bated breath. When Chu and Lianjun were here, she feared that there were other star venerates in the floating spirit manor. The floating spirit manor was a place where spiritual energy gathered. Was the person who set this up so powerful? Could the Lotus Scholars really allow them to return to the mortal world? Did all of this really exist? At that moment, Sumo felt very complicated. If everything was true, Sumo really hoped to see everyone. However, the other 5 of us brothers are all elusive and secretive. Who knows, they might appear in the manor in the next moment, and they might disappear in the next moment, Lianjun said with a smile. Sumo nodded in agreement. Then, she followed the 2 to the main hall. That youth did not enter. Then, a servant served them fragrant tea. Young Master Su, have a cup of tea first, Mr. One said. It has been a rough journey. Let me change my clothes before I chat with young master. Mr. Please go ahead, Sumo said. Mr. One went out. When Mr. Lien saw this, he took his leave as well. Young master, please wait a moment. I will be back soon. Sumo smiled. Only the 2 servants remained in the main hall. Sumo picked up the tea and took a sip. The tea was pretty good. It left a fragrance in her mouth. The 2 servants stood there silently, not saying a word. Sumo spread out her spiritual sense and happened to hear Mr. Lien ask Mr. One. Mr. One, why did you bring him back? Does he know that this is a door to the Kuan Butterfly secret realm? If he enters the secret realm, we will definitely die. Chapter 866. Lianzhen, you're worrying too much, Mr. Wen said with a smile. How can a rogue cultivator make waves on Golden Millet Planet? He doesn't have the ability to kill us. But Mr. Lien seemed to want to say something but was stopped by Mr. Wen. Of course, it was also possible that they had lowered their voices or laid down an enchantment. In any case, Sumo did not hear anything else. Floating Spirit Mountain Village is a gateway to the Kuan Butterfly Mystic Realm? This was something Sumo had never thought of before. After all, this was a Lotus Scholar layout. But why did Mr. Lien say that if he entered the Mystic Realm, she and Mr. Wen would definitely die? For a moment, Sumo could not figure it out and could only slowly sort it out. There were not many cultivators in the entire Floating Spirit Mountain Village. Sumo's divine sense swept the place and found only a few dozen cultivators who looked like servants. The other 5 celestial lords were indeed not here. After a while, Mr. Lien returned and servants prepared food and wine. Gongzi Su, you're a guest from afar. Today, we've prepared some wine to welcome you, Mr. Lien said with a smile. Sorry to disturb you, Mr. Lien. Sumo said politely. Soon, all sorts of delicacies were served, filling the room with a dazzling lineup. In the main hall, several long tables were set up. Mr. Wen returned after a while. He had changed into a clean green gown. He looked refreshed. Gongzi Su, sorry to keep you waiting, Mr. Wen said. Please take a seat. Thus, the 3 of them took their seats as host and guest. Gongzi Su, it's fate that we met. Come, we brothers toast to you. Mr. Wen raised his cup and Mr. Lien also raised his cup. Good. Thank you, sirs. Sumo also raised her cup. Everyone drank a cup. This wine is good. Sumo put down her cup and said with a smile, however, I came from afar and didn't bring anything. I still have a few jars of wine here. Please have a taste. With that, Sumo patted her storage pouch. 3 wine jars flew out and landed on the tables of Mr. Wen and Mr. Lien respectively. What wine is this? Mr. Wen asked. 7-star bitter dew, Sumo said with a smile. At the same time, he kept an eye on Mr. Wen and Mr. Lien's reactions. Wen Chu and Lianzhen were no strangers to the 7 stars of bitter dew. However, when the 2 of them heard the name of the wine, they did not have much of a reaction. All right. Let's have a taste. Thereupon, Mr. Wen and Mr. Lien opened their clay seals. For a moment, the fragrance of the wine filled the room. The 7-star bitter dew was an absolute immortal brew. However, Sumo did not have the true 7 stars of bitter dew on her body. Back then, Bai Yuer had indeed given him a jar of genuine 7 stars bitter dew. However, he and Wang Shui drank it later. The 7 stars of bitter dew that he had taken out now was just an illusion. That would be the same as when he'd conjured Xiao Tiantian and Wu earlier. Actually, with Sumo's current magic power, he could completely create the 7 stars of bitter dew. However, he still felt that something was missing. His 7 stars of bitter dew was far inferior to Xiao Heavenly Court and Wu Er's. However, in this world of truth and falsehood, his wine was enough to deal with everything. Good wine. At this time, Mr. Wen and Mr. Lien both drank the 7 stars of bitter dew. This wine is bitter at first, then sweet. It has a different taste, Mr. Wen said. Yes. Mr. Lien's white eyebrows slightly raised. He held the wine cup and tasted the taste. This taste seems very familiar. It's just that I can't remember when I've had such a taste. It's really good wine. Sumo smiled. How many years have you 2 cultivated on this golden millet star? How many years? Yanjiang played with the wine cup and smiled bitterly. Time flies, I can't remember. Mr. Wen, do you remember? Mr. Wen took a sip of wine, his face also showing an intoxicated expression. I also don't remember. I only know that our young master has reincarnated 10 times. Now it's the 10th time. It's better to forget the specific time. That's right. Mr. Lien nodded and smiled. But it's been 10 times. Time really flies. Sumo listened to their words and frowned. At this time, the young man was not here. Sumo understood that the young man was actually his former self. Back then, he only obtained the devil body after 10 reincarnations. Were the one Chu and Lianzhen in front of him real? At this time, Sumo was also confused. Their realms were very vague, and their memories were also very vague. If they were illusions, it seemed that they should not have the so-called memory of their own reincarnation, because that was the secret between him and Wenmuran. Ordinary people would definitely not know. It should be even more impossible for others to imitate it. However, if they were real, they did not know him now. His current appearance was that of Xiao Luo, and the 2 Star Lords did not remember the 7 stars of bitter dew. Was this golden millet star really the door to the Kuan butterfly mystic realm? In fact, regarding this point, Sumo still somewhat believed. This was because the previous fake Yi Wuhui pointed out that this was a test. In that case, it was completely possible that this place was connected to the Kuan butterfly mystic realm. However, why did Mr. Lien say that if Sumo entered the mystic realm, he and Mr. Wen would both die? This was a little confusing. Sumo could not figure out the crux of the matter. However, if he wanted to break out of this situation, he had to do it in this floating spirit mountain manner. Everyone began to toast each other again. Perhaps the 7 stars of bitter dew was to the liking of the 2 gentlemen. They drank very quickly, and after a while they actually became slightly tipsy. They were all grand cultivators, so it was not the wine that intoxicated them, but the wine that intoxicated them. Gentlemen, can you guide me to the Kuan butterfly mystic realm? Sumo asked again. Ha ha. Young Master Su, go forward. Mr. Wen was still using the same Zen saying. What's so good about the Kuan butterfly mystic realm? Mr. Lien said drunkenly. Young Master Su, you are a man of striking appearance. Why worry about not having a wife? I have a daughter who is traveling outside. If you don't enter the Kuan butterfly mystic realm, I will summon her back and betroth her to you. How about that? That way you won't have to travel. Oh? Ha! Sumo shook her head with a wry smile. That was because Yanjiang was Wu Er's father. Could there be another Wu in this golden millet realm? Then it would be even more difficult to distinguish the real from the fake. Thank you for your kindness, Mr. Lien. However, I still want to make a trip to the Kuan butterfly mystic realm, Sumo said. Ha! Mr. Lien's white eyebrows twitched again, and then he drank the 7 stars of bitter dew in his cup. Young Master Su, the road ahead is confusing, and everything is unknown. Don't regret it. I won't, Sumo said solemnly. Whoosh! Suddenly, a gust of wind blew. The scene in front of Sumo suddenly changed. Sumo was no longer in the main hall, but a study. The study was filled with ancient scrolls. Mr. Wen and Mr. Lien were not there. In a corner of the study, a person sat upright. It was the youth from before. Young Master? Sumo could not help but ask, where are the 2 gentlemen? They are both drunk. The youth looked at Sumo and said calmly, So, I came to accompany you. I can't rest assured with you here. Why? Sumo did not understand. Because you want to go to the Kuan butterfly mystic realm. The youth's voice was slightly cold. I'm afraid that you will harm the gentleman. Chapter 867. Oh! Suemo looked at the young man and frowned. So you're saying that you're the one who brought me to this study? That's right. The youth closed the scroll in his hands. But don't worry, as long as you stay in this study for a full 6 hours, I'll be able to find you. As long as you stay in this study for 6 hours, I will let you out. Why 6 hours? Sumo said. Because the Koan butterfly mystic realm will close in 6 hours. If you want to go in, you won't have the chance. So I just need to watch over you for 6 hours, and you won't be a threat anymore, the youth said. The Koan butterfly mystic realm will close? Sumo was stunned. Yes. The youth nodded. Sumo frowned and did not speak. Because he was in the golden millet realm, everything could be fake. How could she believe the youth's words so easily? What's the relationship between Mr. Wen and Mr. Lien and the Koan butterfly mystic realm? Sumo asked. Mr. Wen won't let me say. The youth said. Sumo could not help but laugh. Are you afraid of Mr. Wen? I'm not afraid, the youth said seriously. I respect him. Mr. Wen treats me like a teacher and a father. During my 10 reincarnations, he was the one who protected me. He is the closest person to me. Yes. Sumo nodded. She felt a little sad. Naturally, he understood this point. Xiao Luo. Sumo suddenly called out. The youth's expression changed. How do you know my name? Hee. Suemo smiled and said, Not only do I know your name, but I also know those 2 gentlemen. One is Wenchu, and the other is Lianjun. The floating spirit mountain manor is inhabited by the ancient 7 stars, right? You came from the Koan butterfly mystic realm? Who are you? Xiao Luo's expression turned serious. At the same time, he sat up straight. It was an extremely vigilant action. You will know who I am very soon, Sumo said. But before that, I want to know the relationship between the 2 Mr. Wenchu and the Koan butterfly mystic realm. Also, how do we enter the Koan butterfly mystic realm? Are you from the southern abyss sea? Xiao Luo raised his eyebrows slightly. Where is the Nanyuan Sea? Sumo asked. This was the first time he heard that word. Stop playing dumb. If you are not from the southern abyss sea, how do you know us? You won't be able to leave today. The youth, Xiao Luo, had already soared up. His speed was beyond Sumo's imagination. What realm was that? At that moment, the young Xiao Luo didn't have the shyness and timidity that he had when they first met. His aura was extremely powerful. A peak stage venerable? The entire study was filled with his aura. Sumo even felt like she was being imprisoned. The youth, Xiao Luo, stretched out his hand, and a beam of profound light shot towards Sumo. At the same time, the bookshelves in the entire study started to move. Hua, the space in the study extended endlessly. All the ancient books suddenly flew into the void. However, they were not messy. Instead, they were rather organized. A book array. Sumo definitely didn't expect the youth, Xiao Luo, to be so powerful. Most importantly, he didn't recognize those Dharma spells at all. This was because they weren't inheritances from the Taihuang region. In Sumo's memory, he didn't have such cultivation at his age. Sumo quickly retreated. At the same time, he waved his hand, and the lotus vine was already in his hand. Crack! The lotus vine danced, and directly dispersed the profound light of the youth, Xiao Luo. However, the youth, Xiao Luo, waved his hand, and a long whip appeared in his hand. The long whip was black, and it looked a lot like Yi Xingbai's Mara star-chasing whip. However, the long whip had 9 black bells on it. Lianbua? Sumo had never seen that long whip before. Clank, 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 clank. The long whip coiled and went straight for the lotus vine. Sumo couldn't believe it. This youth, Xiao Luo, actually had such power. The black whip coiled and directly wrapped around the lotus vine. 1 black and 1 green, 1 whip and 1 vine coiled around each other. Humph! The youth, Xiao Luo, snorted coldly. He looked again and waved his hand. The ancient books that filled the sky suddenly emitted a bronze light. In an instant, it was as dense as a net. The entire space in the study was filled with thin threads of light. Those threads were like sharp blades, cutting the entire space. 3 feet around Sumo, there were threads of light. If you don't move, you won't have to worry about your life. The youth, Xiao Luo, looked at Sumo and said, 6 hours. How could the past me kill the present me? Sumo sneered. At the same time, with a thought, the cosmos sack had already flown out. Collect! Sumo shouted softly. Whoosh! The ancient books that filled the sky instantly collapsed under the cosmos sack. It was the same as what Sumo had thought. Those books were not Lianhua. Under the cosmos sack they would all be collected. However, when they flew toward the cosmos sack, they immediately turned into green smoke. The youth, Xiao Luo, raised his eyebrows. If I capture you, tell me the secret of the Kuan butterfly. Sumo said, also, I'm not from the southern Abyss Sea. No, that's better. However, with your ability, it's impossible for you to capture me. The youth, Xiao Luo, said. Do you dare to make a bet? Sumo said. What bet? The youth, Xiao Luo, asked. If I defeat you, you will tell me everything. Sumo said. If I defeat you, you will leave the floating spirit mountain manor and never disturb the teacher again. The youth, Xiao Luo, said, We don't welcome people like you here. Fine. Sumo's heart sank, but she still agreed. Could it be that everything in the floating spirit mountain manor was real? Otherwise, why would the youth make such a request? The youth, Xiao Luo, was protecting the teacher. Watch out for my whip. As soon as Sumo's voice fell, the youth's black whip flew out. This time, he did not tangle with Sumo's lotus vine. However, the bells on the black whip emitted an extremely strange sound. Ding, empty, pa-pa, boom, boom. It was hard to imagine that the 9 black bells could emit such a sound. It was as if someone was smashing an ancient copper door with great force. At the same time, the black whip was as straight as a spear, piercing toward Sumo. Transform! Sumo flipped her wrist, and the lotus vine had already turned into a bamboo pole. Chi, boom, the 2 Lianhua clashed. However, they did not cause a large spiritual tide. This study was very strange. The battle between 2 venerable realm figures was enough to destroy a small world. However, the study did not move at all. A boundary. There must be a special barrier around this study. Otherwise, the youth, Xiao Luo, would not want to trap himself here. Sumo thought to herself. Ding, ding, boom, the 2 Lianhua clashed, but Sumo was not at a disadvantage. However, the ringing of the bells was like a sharp sword piercing into Sumo's sea of consciousness. Rise. Sumo willed. The yin-yang bell had already flown out. Originally, Sumo did not intend to take out this treasure. However, he did not have a clear concept of time in this floating spirit mountain village. 6 hours would pass very quickly. He could not completely believe the youth's words, nor could he not. He had to hurry up and finish the battle quickly. Moreover, the best way to deal with the sound attack was to take out the yin-yang bell. Ding! Buzz! As soon as the yin-yang bell appeared, Sumo used her spiritual tide to lightly shake it. In an instant, a wave of air could be seen in the air, but there was no sound. Loud sound. The youth, Xiao Luo, could not help but change his expression. Sumo's treasure was indeed beyond his imagination. Bang, bang. 3 of the 9 bells on Xiao Luo's black whip were directly shattered by the yin-yang bell, directly turning into black mist and dissipating. Seal. Sumo shouted coldly and formed a seal with her hands. The yin-yang bell instantly enlarged by several times and directly enveloped Xiao Luo. However, the youth, Xiao Luo, revealed a cold smile. Chapter 868. The yin-yang bell was a top-notch Lianhua. Even though Xiao Luo was at the peak of the supremacy realm, he would not be able to withstand the yin-yang bell's attack. Therefore, Sumo was confident in his seal. Of course, he did not intend to kill Xiao Luo. However, the development of the situation greatly exceeded Sumo's expectations. The yin-yang bell descended with a majestic aura. It looked like it was about to envelop Xiao Luo, but it suddenly stopped 3 feet above his head. The youth, Xiao Luo, looked at Suemo strangely. Young Master Su, this world is mine. How can you seal me? Xiao Luo sneered. Don't forget that I was the one who brought you to this space. Devour. Xiao Luo formed a seal with his hands. Whoosh, Sumo felt his vision blur. In an instant, he had already switched places with Xiao Luo. The yin-yang bell actually fell straight down. Boom! Sumo was actually trapped by his yin-yang bell. This scene was simply unimaginable. Although Sumo possessed the memories of various worlds, this was the first time he had encountered such a battle. It was laughable and embarrassing to think about it. Sumo was sealed by his other self's Lianhua. At that moment, he wanted to cry but no tears came out. Space-time technique. However, Sumo also understood that Xiao Luo was using a space-time technique. He had reversed the space-time he was in. This young man could control this space-time. Seal. At the same time that the yin-yang bell trapped Sumo, Xiao Luo shouted and directly took out a talisman, wanting to imprint it on the yin-yang bell. He understood that the yin-yang bell alone could not seal Sumo. However, this time, he had taken it for granted. After all, the yin-yang bell was Sumo's Dharma treasure. He had switched places with Sumo, but he could not cut off the connection between Sumo and the Dharma treasure. The moment the talisman landed, the yin-yang bell suddenly rebounded. The sealing talisman directly hit the yin-yang bell and instantly turned into a black mist. Then, the yin-yang bell returned to its original size and floated above Sumo's head. Xiao Luo, you are really capable. Sumo looked at the young Xiao Luo with mixed feelings. As far as he was concerned, that was his past self. Same here. Likewise. Xiao Luo nodded. Where did your magic come from? Sumo narrowed her eyes. That's definitely not a Dharma spell that the ancient 7 stars could impart to you, nor is it a legacy from the great wilderness. Great desolate inheritance. Xiao Luo said disdainfully. I've never heard of the inheritance you speak of. Could it be that there is such a strange immortal sect in the southern Abyss Sea? Oh! Sumo was surprised. At that moment, he was confused again. Did the Taihuang sect not exist in Xiao Luo's memories? What is your inheritance? Sumo asked again. Of course it's the Kuan butterfly inheritance, Xiao Luo said proudly. My 10 reincarnations were all in the Kuan butterfly star realm. In my previous life, I was from the Kuan butterfly lineage, so I naturally learned the Kuan butterfly Dharma spells. Are those 2 people from the Kuan butterfly star realm? Sumo frowned. Of course, Xiao Luo said. There's no harm in telling you. Not only are we from the Kuan butterfly star realm, but we also came from the Kuan butterfly mystic realm. Otherwise, do you think anyone can build a villa on Golden Millet Planet? You all came from the Kuan butterfly mystic realm. Sumo's heart turned cold. This was because Xiao Luo's words seemed to prove that his previous judgment was wrong. Wen Chu, Lianzhen, and Xiao Luo were all real cultivators. However, they had been sent to this star that was both real and fake by the Lotus Warrior who had set them up. That was how Su Mo had met them. They appeared as important people in Sumo's life to confuse Sumo so that she would not be able to find the door to the Kuan butterfly mystic realm. They should be punished. Although there were still some issues that didn't seem right, this was already a reasonable explanation. Sumo's face tightened involuntarily. If that's the case, Xiao Luo, be careful. Sumo's expression was solemn. At this moment, a lot of time must have been spent on this. 6 hours. That was the time that Xiao Luo wanted to buy. Originally, Sumo was still hesitant. He didn't want to kill them. Especially when facing Mr. One, Sumo's feelings were not something that others could understand. However, since they were all Kuan butterfly cultivators, so what if he killed them? It didn't matter if they were real or fake. Whoosh, whoosh, Sumo thought. He wanted to return to the main hall immediately and kill Mr. One and Mr. Lien. Then, he might be able to get out of this situation. A forbidden map appeared under Sumo's feet. Once the words were spoken, the map was created. Sumo's forbidden map technique no longer needed to be drawn. In an instant, the forbidden map under Sumo's feet surged like a river. The splendor of various colors suddenly rippled, rising and falling like a tide. The changes of the forbidden map were endless, because it could deduce countless possibilities. However, what Sumo deduced was the forbidden reincarnation technique. The moment the forbidden map appeared, Xiao Luo's eyes narrowed. Because he had never seen a forbidden map technique or even heard of it, he didn't know what kind of technique it was. However, he could feel that Sumo's technique was extraordinary. Lotus technique? Space-time technique? That was Xiao Luo's speculation, because he had already sensed the change in the space-time of this study. As soon as Sumo's forbidden map appeared, the space-time of his study was already unstable. It was an extremely strange feeling. An inexplicable power pulled at everything, causing this space-time to change. Whoosh, the river of the forbidden map surged with waves. The splendor of various colors spread outward. When he looked again, the space-time of the study suddenly began to shrink. It was like a replay that had been extended infinitely just now. The entire study began to become smaller. Then, the books that had been exploded by Sumo's cosmos sack began to reappear. The position of the bookshelves also began to restore. Even Xiao Luo felt his emotions returning to normal. It was an extremely strange feeling. Everything seemed to be going back in time. In fact, everything happened very quickly. Xiao Luo didn't understand the profound meaning of Sumo's technique at this moment. It wasn't until he inexplicably returned to the desk and opened the scroll again that he suddenly realized what was going on. Space-time reversal. This was an earth-shattering technique. Sumo's technique could actually reverse space-time? He adjusted the space-time of the study back to the previous space-time. In this way, he could escape. This was simply unimaginable. Whoosh, Xiao Luo understood. However, it was all too late. Sumo stepped out of the forbidden map and directly left the study. The place where she landed was the main hall where she had just drunk with Mr. Wan and Mr. Lien. The air was filled with the fragrance of the 7 stars bitter dew. Mr. Wan and Mr. Lien each reclined behind a long table, sound asleep. Sumo's eyes turned cold. The lotus vines in her hands had already turned into 2 flying blades. Chapter 869. 2 flying blades went straight for the 2 masters. At that moment, Sumo only wanted to kill them. She could open the Koan butterfly secret realm by killing them. Although Xiao Luo's words could not be completely trusted, Sumo still thought it was worth a try. However, just as the 2 flying blades were about to hit the 2 masters, Xiao Luo appeared out of thin air. Looking again, his long black whip shook left and right. Boom, crack, the 2 light blades were directly dispersed by him. Xiao Luo stood in front of Sumo again, his expression cold. Sumo, if you want to kill the masters, you must kill me first. Sumo frowned. He did not expect Xiao Luo to leave his forbidden painting so quickly. I'll kill you then, Sumo said coldly. Time was limited, and he did not want to delay. Boom, Sumo took out the yin-yang bell again. This time, it was different from the previous time. This was no longer the space-time boundary Xiao Luo had set up. The yin-yang bell carried the momentum of wind and thunder, heading straight for Xiao Luo. Xiao Luo wanted to leap out. However, the yin-yang bell had already emitted yin and yang energies. It was an aura that even Lotus scholars had to retreat from. Yin and yang contained the essence of the universe. The 2 yin and yang energies entangled Xiao Luo like 2 poisonous dragons. Boom! Xiao Luo was unable to break free and was trapped by the yin-yang bell. This was more or less beyond Sumo's expectations. Could it be that Xiao Luo's battle prowess had been greatly reduced after leaving the study? However, Sumo did not think too much about it. Boom! The sound of Xiao Luo knocking on the walls of the yin-yang bell could be heard. However, it only rang once, and then there was no more sound. The corners of Sumo's mouth curled up. He knew that striking inside the yin-yang bell would inevitably result in a backlash. No one would be able to bear that. After trapping Xiao Luo, Sumo looked at Mr. Wen and Mr. Lien again. Actually, there was something strange. Mr. Wen and Mr. Lien did not wake up. After all, they were all great cultivators. Not to mention the fact that Sumo couldn't clearly see their cultivations. Even if they had drunk a jar of 7 stars bitter dew with their cultivations in the past, they wouldn't have gotten so drunk. Sumo raised her eyebrows again and pinched with one hand. 2 blood-red roses had already appeared in his hands. Destroy! Sumo waved her hand. 2 blood roses flew towards the foreheads of the 2 people. The devil flower was comparable to a venerable divine weapon. If they were hit, the 2 of them would definitely die. Whether they were real or illusory, they would all dissipate. However, their breathing was extremely steady, without any change. In fact, the smiles on their faces were no different from before. 7-star bitter dew, that was the taste they yearned for even in their dreams. Bang! However, the yin-yang bell rang again. Sumo's soul couldn't help but tremble. He didn't expect Xiao Luo to ring the bell again, because it could very well mean suicide. The ringing of the yin-yang bell was fatal to Xiao Luo, who was inside the bell. However, his voice wasn't loud this time. It seemed that Xiao Luo had used the last of his strength. Don't kill Mr. In fact, Xiao Luo's voice didn't come out. However, Xiao Luo's voice sounded in Sumo's heart. That voice seemed to be real but not real. However, it was like an existence that was imprinted in his soul. Even after hundreds of reincarnations, it had never been erased. He couldn't kill Mr. At that moment, Sumo's heart couldn't help but twitch. Previously, he thought that he had already overcome the obstacle in his heart. However, he realized that he hadn't. Whoosh! Sumo's heart moved. The 2 devil flowers stopped 3 inches in front of Wen Chu and Lianjin's foreheads. Therefore, Sumo couldn't help but take a closer look at the 2 people. Yanjiang was Wu Er's father. However, he died in the Great Wilderness War. Later on, Xiao Luo obtained the power of an underworld venerable and summoned their souls back for reincarnation. Lianjin's wish was for Xiao Luo to marry Wu. Civil star Wen Muran. Among the 7 stars, Wen Muran was definitely the most special existence to Xiao Luo. In the past 10,000 years, Wen Muran had never left Xiao Luo's side. From an infant to a tribulation cultivator, Wen Muran had always stood behind Xiao Luo. In 10 reincarnations, Xiao Luo had suffered 1,000 hardships and tasted all kinds of sins, but he had always had Wen Muran's protection and support. It could be said that Wen Muran had poured all of his efforts into Xiao Luo. To Xiao Luo, Wen Muran was his teacher and father. If there was anyone who was the most important person in Xiao Luo's life, it was definitely not the Emperor of Taihuang, but Wen Muran. Without Wen Muran's protection, Xiao Luo could not have fully grown. In the sea-desolate divine continent, Wen Muran could be said to have racked his brains for Xiao Luo and the Taihuang sect. Xiao Luo always remembered the battle outside the Brahma temple. That time Wen Muran had sought death. Wen Muran had chosen to die at the hands of Wu Outyan. Literary songs and martial songs helped each other achieve their goals. However, when Wen Muran died, Xiao Luo was not present, because he had come too late. Although in the demon continent's Azura world, Wen Muran had returned to the human world due to Xiao Luo's summons. However, Xiao Luo had rarely seen the smile on Mr. Wen's face. There was a thin veil between him and Mr. Wen. Wen Muran was still loyal and devoted, but he didn't have the feeling of roaming the seas in the past. The Wen Muran of the Azura world was not the same. You would rather suffer eternal destruction than seek freedom from the saints. Mister, what are you seeking? Back then, Xiao Luo had held Wen Muran's remnant soul and asked while crying. Unfortunately, Wen Muran had never answered his question. Later, Xiao Luo became the Demon King, the Demon Lord, and the Dark Sovereign. However, there had never been an answer to this question. When Muron had nurtured Xiao Luo with everything he had, but Xiao Luo had never understood when Muron. Dang, the yin-yang bell trembled slightly again. Xiao Luo was still striking with all his might inside the bell. He did not want to die first. Sumo's eyes narrowed. The one Muron in front of him was the one who had brought him to the desolate sea. At that time they had been working hard to restore the desolate sea. 10 reincarnations, only they understood the joy and bitterness of it. At that time, in Xiao Luo's world, other than the desolate sea, there was only Mr. One. Sumo took a deep breath. However, he understood that regardless of whether this was an illusion or not, there was a power preventing him from killing Wen Chu and Lianzhen. Because as long as he killed both of them, he should be able to break out of this predicament. This meant that he was not trapped in his heart, and did not have any inner demons. Sumo wanted to break out of this predicament. The blood rose inched forward another 2 inches. When Muron and Lianzhen had not woken up. At this time, Sumo already understood that they would not wake up. They were part of this predicament. Sumo's breathing was somewhat heavy. Mr. was already dead. Back then, when Amu created the galaxy, the 7 stars had not reincarnated. Therefore, they had fallen into eternity. Mr. could not come back. Everything in front of him was an illusion, a test. Sumo continued to strengthen his killing intent. Blood rose moved another half an inch closer. Blood marks had already begun to appear on the foreheads of Wen Chu and Lianzhen. However, they were still at peace. Break out of this predicament! Save Wu! Sumo shouted in his heart. In fact, even if they were alive, they would be willing to die in Sumo's hands. Because they were willing to die for Xiao Luo and Wu. Sumo clenched his teeth. He had already raised his hands. He wanted to control Blood Rose to move another half an inch closer. His hands were trembling, and the corners of his eyes were splitting. However, at that moment, he could not bring himself to kill Mr. Even if it was an illusion. Even if he was Sumo. The Lotus Warrior could turn illusions into reality. If it could become reality, then wouldn't it be better to let Mr. and Xiao Luo live in such a world? Back then, it was Mr. who had died for him. Why couldn't he give up on breaking out of this predicament for Mr.? Thinking of this, tears welled up in Sumo's eyes, but he smiled. Mr., I am willing to let you live. Bang! Blood Rose dissipated with a sound. What a pity, Sumo. At that moment, the voice of Yi Wuhue suddenly sounded. You have failed the second test. Chapter 870. I failed. Sumo's pupils constricted slightly. Then, he let out a long sigh. However, since he chose not to kill the teacher, he had to accept this result. Immediately, Sumo turned around. At this moment, a female cultivator was floating in the air not far from him. The female cultivator was beautiful, but she was dressed in plain clothes. There was a hatchet at her waist. If she was not standing in front of Sumo, Sumo would not be sure that she was a cultivator. This was because the female cultivator did not have any aura of a cultivator. However, the moment the female cultivator appeared, the entire world seemed to stop. Everything around Sumo became blurry. There seemed to be a thin layer of fog between him and the floating spirit mountain village. He could not even sense the aura of the yin-yang bell. You are the one who set this up? Sumo looked at the female cultivator. That's right. The female cultivator said, Unfortunately, Demon King, you passed the first stage, but you did not pass the second stage. I understand. Sumo nodded. Do you regret it? The female cultivator smiled faintly. You lost the chance to enter the Kuan Butterfly Mystic Realm. Is there really a Kuan Butterfly Mystic Realm? Sumo asked. Of course. The female cultivator said, Actually, what you see and hear here is not all an illusion. What is real and what is fake are all tangled together. Not only is there a Kuan Butterfly Mystic Realm, but the plum blossom sprite you found is also in the Kuin butterfly mystic realm. And Sumo was silent for a moment, then nodded heavily. You regret it now? The female cultivator's lips curved. However, I can give you another chance on account of the plum blossom sprite. You can still turn around and kill them. Whoosh! Sumo could not help but turn around. Everything in front of him had returned to its original state. Wen Chu, Lian Zhen and the rest were still lying down behind the table. Their expressions did not change. However, when Sumo looked at them, he could not help but smile. Then, with a wave of his hand, 2 cloaks appeared and landed on Wen Chu and Lian Zhen. Star Venerates, thank you for your hard work. Please accept Sumo's bow. As she spoke, Sumo knelt down and bowed deeply. Both of them were qualified to be kowtowed to by Sumo. Senior, I've made up my mind. Even if I don't enter the Kuin butterfly mystic realm, I won't kill you too, Sumo said to the female cultivator. The female cultivator sneered. Demon King, they are actually illusions. Why are you so obsessed with them? Senior, I have a presumptuous request. I wonder if it's possible? Sumo turned around and didn't answer the question. Let's hear it. The plain-clothed female cultivator said. Senior, since you have great magic power, you can make them reappear here. Sumo paused for a moment before continuing. I beg Senior to allow them to live forever. Live forever? When the plain-clothed female cultivator heard this, she shook her head. Demon King, I do have great magic power to pass off the fake as the real. I can also make the 2 star venerates in front of you turn illusions into reality, but they can't leave my world. Moreover, they aren't the real star venerates of Taihuang. So, I can't do your request. Hearing the plain-clothed female cultivator's words, Sumo nodded heavily. However, perhaps one day, when you become a Lotus Knight, you might be able to find their Dao shadows in the southern abyssal sea. That way, with their Dao shadows, you might be able to resurrect them. Southern abyssal sea? Dao shadows? Sumo was stunned. He had heard about the southern abyssal sea from the youth, Xiao Luo, but what was a Dao shadow? Please enlighten me, Senior, Sumo said. The plain-clothed female cultivator shook her head and laughed. The southern abyssal sea is also known as the minor samsara sea. Within it, some of the souls of those whose Dao perished would leave behind a trace of Dao shadow. Lotus Knights can use those Dao shadows to bring them back to the human world. The 3 realms galaxy was devoured by Yizong. Theoretically, the primordial 7 stars should have left their Dao shadows there. However, I can't guarantee that there will be. Where is the southern abyssal sea? Sumo said. The southern abyssal sea is in the south of colored glass. The plain-clothed female cultivator said, however, only Lotus Knights can see that Dao sea. The current you is too weak. South of colored glass realm. Sumo silently noted it down in her heart. Wasn't AMU sealed in the colored glass realm? It seemed like the colored glass realm was an important place. Thank you, Senior, Sumo said. May I ask how is Wu Er doing in the Kuin butterfly star sea? Plum blossom sprite? The plain-clothed female cultivator looked at Sumo and smiled meaningfully. Demon King, go take a look and you will know. Sumo was stunned. Didn't he lose the chance to go to the Kuin butterfly mystic realm? Demon King, congratulations. You have passed the second test. At this moment, the plain-clothed female cultivator suddenly said to Sumo. Sumo was stunned again. Before this, everything was a test. Actually, if you had killed the 2 Demon King, you would have truly failed to pass the test. The plain-clothed female cultivator said. Why? Sumo was puzzled. If I don't remember kindness, how can I enter the Kuin butterfly mystic realm? In order to achieve their goals, they will do anything. In the eyes of the Kuin butterfly race, such cultivators are the real demons, the female cultivator said. Demon King, although you call yourself a demon, you have kindness in your heart. That's why you passed the second test. Actually, just now I was creating opportunities for you to kill them. Otherwise, how could you seal that young Xiao Luo so easily? But that young Xiao Luo kept stopping me from killing Mr. He even kept striking the yin-yang bell, Sumo said. The plain-clothed female cultivator laughed. Actually, that young Xiao Luo is half your heart demon, and the other half is my illusion. Previously, I did let him stop you on purpose to prevent you from being suspicious. However, the constant striking of the yin-yang bell was not my arrangement, but your own illusion. Look again. The plain-clothed female cultivator waved her hand. She looked again, and the yin-yang bell rang. That young Xiao Luo sat calmly in the yin-yang bell, completely unharmed. If he had struck the yin-yang bell, it would not have looked like this. What's real and what's fake? No matter what, you have passed the second test. The plain-clothed female cultivator said. Thank you, Senior. Sumo thanked her sincerely. He did not expect this to be the result. Senior, now that you have revealed your true body, can you give me a name and tell me where you came from? The plain-clothed female cultivator shook her head. Demon King, there is still one last test. If you pass it, I will naturally wait for you in the Kuan Butterfly Mystic Realm. At that time, you will naturally know who I am. If you cannot pass the test and reach the Kuan Butterfly Star Ocean, why would you need to know who I am? Sumo understands. Sumo bowed towards the female cultivator. The last test. Demon King, do your best. The plain-clothed female cultivator waved her hand as she spoke. Who was Sumo's vision blurred, and the plain-clothed female cultivator disappeared. When he looked again, everything around him no longer existed. Xiao Luo, Wenchu, and Lianzhen had all disappeared. Where was the floating spirit mountain village? Where was the Nank continent? The yin-yang bell returned to his hand. At the same time, the little white pig suddenly landed on his shoulder. The little fellow's eyes seemed to be filled with fear because it had lost its way. Just as it was feeling anxious, Sumo suddenly appeared in front of it. The little fellow no longer dared to run around. At this time, a brilliant galaxy appeared in front of Sumo and the little white pig. Chapter 871. Galaxy? Sumo \S expression changed slightly. The previous 2 rounds were in the so-called Golden Millet Star, but he did not expect to come to the galaxy world this time. Humph! The little white pig looked at the incomparably brilliant starry sky in front of him, and his eyes lit up. However, he did not dare to fly out casually anymore. That was because when he flew out previously, he fell into endless chaos. Humph! This is the galaxy. Sumo looked at the galaxy and said. In fact, when Sumo used the Pure Land Galaxy technique previously, he had also summoned the remnant of the galaxy. However, that was only a remnant after all, and what was in front of him now was the full galaxy. From afar, the galaxy world was even more gorgeous than the Prajna realm. Humph! The little white pig could feel Sumo \S excitement and could not help but echo. Hee. Sumo smiled faintly. His feelings for the galaxy was not something the little white pig could truly understand. Then, he moved and headed straight for the Milky Way. In theory, he could see the galaxy from afar, so it should be extremely far away. However, in less than 2 hours, Sumo had already reached the edge of the galaxy. At that moment, Sumo understood that this was another world created for him. Lotus Warrior. Although Sumo had encountered Lucidum before, because of the White Mountain token, Sumo did not directly see how powerful Lucidum was. Now, Sumo really experienced the power of a Lotus Warrior. With such a cultivation base, it would be easy for the plain-clothed female cultivator to kill Sumo. Previously, Sumo looked down on Lotus Warriors. However, now he had a new understanding of Lotus Warriors. That was an existence that he absolutely could not contend against now. Moreover, once he reached the Lotus Warrior realm, he seemed to be able to change many things. the rebirth of an old friend and the reconstruction of the world. This set off a ripple in Sumo \s heart. He must become a Lotus warrior or even an existence of a higher level. He thought to himself and did not stop walking. The Three Realms Galaxy. To Sumo, this was a world of special significance. It was because in this life, his ultimate wish of reincarnating in the Izang world was to create another galaxy. He didn't know how that clothed female cultivator did it. This galaxy could be said to be a miniature version of the real galaxy. At the same time, Sumo found that her spiritual sense had completely recovered. The divine sense of the third layer Martial Highness realm could cover a few small worlds. Thus, Sumo began to revisit this old place in the Milky Way. At this moment, Sumo had completely lost track of time. "Humph, this used to be my home," Sumo said to the little white pig. "Humph." The little white pig lay on Sumo's shoulder and nodded vigorously. Then, it stared blankly at everything around it with its round eyes. Although it was a little curious, it still obediently stayed on Sumo's shoulder. 3,000 worlds the Demon King was patrolling. At that moment, Sumo really felt like he had returned to the past. Unfortunately, he understood that all of this was a world created by the clothed female cultivator. Then, what was the third trial? Sumo pondered as he traversed the Milky Way. However, he soon discovered that there was not a single cultivator on the planets he had been to. This was very strange. Could it be that the clothed female cultivator didn't make any arrangements when she created this world? Although this galaxy was small, it had all the planets. But why weren't there any cultivators? Not only were there no cultivators, in the areas that Sumo had been to, other than rocks, plants, birds and beasts, there wasn't even a single mortal to be seen. What kind of arrangement was this? Sumo was puzzled. For 3 days and 3 nights, Sumo had been traveling in this galaxy. But all the worlds he saw were the same. Thus, Sumo frowned. He headed straight for the immortal planet where the Milky Way era settled. This time, Sumo didn't ride the wind. Instead, he chose to jump through space. In a few moments, he had already appeared in the void outside the immortal planet. The immortal planet was the planet where Xiao Luo came back to life during the galaxy era. Back then, Amu broke the karma and left on the immeasurable ship. The entire 3 realms was completely broken, then reformed. Sumo actually didn't have any memories of that period. Because no matter who he was in the range of Amu's broken karma. He didn't know what he had experienced during that period and how long it had been. Sumo only remembered that when he woke up as Xiao Luo, the entire world had become a galaxy. Wu Air was right next to him. Everything seemed natural. There was no transition, but there was no confusion either. The immortal planet was a 5-colored planet. With a single thought, Sumo entered the void of the immortal star's inner world. Looking down from the void, he could see the mountains and rivers. The scenery was extremely beautiful. Sumo's gaze fell on a sea. That sea was formed by the river of forgetfulness. Not far from the sea was the village where Xiao Luo and Wu Air used to live. The village was filled with plum blossoms. Sumo landed outside the village and walked forward slowly. Sumo was extremely familiar with everything here. However, the scenery here seemed to unfold with Sumo's footsteps, like a scroll. Everything was real, yet unreal. At that moment, Sumo couldn't tell if it was a formation set up by someone or his own thoughts. Would everything be like the youth Xiao Luo in the second test? A winding path with the fragrance of flowers on both sides. There was only Xiao Luo's house in the ancient village. It was indeed a quiet place. In the distance, Sumo already heard the sound of water and saw an exquisite 2-story bamboo building. That's right. That was the plum blossom house where he and Wu Air once lived in seclusion. Outside the bamboo building, there were 2 towering plum trees. Their branches and leaves covered them like pavilions. On the side, there was a meandering stream of water. A wooden bridge stretched across the water. Everything was simple, natural, and charming. Beside the stream of water, there were 4 crooked words engraved on a large green stone: Plum Blossom House. That was what Wu Er had engraved. A knowing smile flashed across Sumo's face. Because back then, he had laughed at Wu Er's handwriting, saying that she deliberately made it ugly. Wu Er, Sumo called softly. However, the Plum Blossom House was empty. No one responded. Sumo looked around. The furnishings here were exactly the same as back then. However, he didn't find any traces of Xiao Huang. Originally, there should be a room for Xiao Huang here, but now there wasn't. Could it be that this is an era without Xiao Huang? Sumo asked himself. From the looks of it, it should be. Here, there was no him and there was no Wu Er. Sumo couldn't figure it out. He didn't understand how this round would go. This seemed to be different from the previous 2 rounds. So, he turned to the back of the bamboo building and couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Because there was a simple stove here and there was a copper pot on it. The stove was boiling water, the steam was scattered, but there was no one. Chapter 872. Samsara of Ichikata computer smashed. Please wait for a moment. After the content has been updated, please refresh the page to receive the latest update. Chapter 873. He was in an old place, but he couldn't see his old friends. What kind of desolation was that? Although Sumo knew that the galaxy in front of him was just a magical world of the Lotus Warriors, he still hoped to see the person he wanted to see, just like when he saw Neuron in the previous illusion. How could he be willing to not see her? Seeing Wu-er in someone else's illusion was completely different from seeing her in his own illusion. Unfortunately, this world was different. There was almost no one in the entire world, and Wu-er was nowhere to be seen in the Plum Blossom House. Sumo stood behind the bamboo house in a daze. Because the fire in the stove was extinguishing bit by bit. That meant that it was not an eternal magical art, but a real fire. In the stove, the ashes were still there, and the water in the copper kettle was boiling. There was someone here just now. However, when Sumo spread out his divine sense, there was no one on the entire immortal planet. What the hell was going on? The wind blew, and the bamboo forest rustled. For a moment, Sumo's mind was in a mess. An indescribable feeling spread in Sumo's heart. He hadn't felt that feeling for a long time. Whoosh! So, Sumo formed a seal with his hands. Outside the bamboo house, spiritual energy was everywhere, and the void was fluctuating. That was Sumo's magical art. He wanted everything that had happened in this world to repeat itself. However, there were only spiritual energy fluctuations in the void, and he couldn't form an image. His magical art actually failed here. He couldn't see the scene before the fire in the stove burned. So, Sumo raised his hand and picked up a plum blossom. Then, he threw the plum blossom into the void, wanting to transform it into Wu-er. Whoosh! The plum blossom dispersed, and the fragrance spread in all directions. However, just as it transformed into the outline of a woman, it was blown away by the wind. Sumo actually couldn't transform into a plum blossom spirit. It seemed that this space was of a higher level. One had to know that in the first round, he could use an illusion to make Xiao Tian and Wu-er appear again. However, he couldn't do that now. Sumo raised his eyebrows. His divine sense had clearly recovered, so why didn't the 2 magical arts work? Once again, Sumo's hands sketched in the air. A series of runes appeared as he waved his hands. The multicolored talisman seals rippled with colorful light as they began to deduce. This was an inheritance from Amu. Whoosh! In an instant, the seal was like a sea, and the forbidden diagram was formed. Sumo wanted to change spacetime, to make the spacetime before the small plum blossom house appear. However, no matter how the forbidden map moved, the surroundings did not change at all. On the contrary, The unburned ashes in the stove gradually lost their luster. The fire had completely stopped. The forbidden diagram was ineffective. Sumo's expression changed slightly. Because ever since he learned the forbidden painting technique, it had only failed once with Wang Shui. Since then, it had been tried and tested, and he had resolved many crises. This world was actually so powerful? Sumo's face tightened, and then she pondered for a moment. She couldn't help but leap forward and take a step forward to the left. This was his first step back to the soul storage altar. Previously, no matter what situation he was in, he could escape from this world with this footwork. Whoosh, but this time, after Sumo leaped, his surroundings were still the same plum blossom house. There was no change. He couldn't leave this world at all. This time did not seem to have passed. Sumo had a bad feeling, because both of his trump cards had failed. This was a situation that had never happened before. Humph. Try and see if you can return to the soul storage altar, Sumo said. Humph. When the little white pig heard this, it jumped up from Sumo's shoulder. Sumo's footwork came from the little white pig. That little fellow's footwork might be even more skilled than Sumo's. But after jumping 3 or 4 times, it only bounced around the small plum blossom house. It looked charmingly naive and extremely cute. Humph. The little white pig drooped its head and then looked helplessly at Sumo. It also understood that they might not be able to return to the soul storage altar this time. Their biggest escape route had been blocked. Humph. Go back to the universe pouch first. This galaxy world is too strange and dangerous, Sumo said. Humph. This time, the little white pig was very obedient. It nodded and turned into a white light, returning to Sumo's storage pouch. Although Sumo was here, it still felt a little uneasy. Everything around it was too scary. Therefore, it was better to go back to sleep. Maybe everything would be fine when it woke up. After putting away Humph, Sumo adjusted his breathing and looked around again. But he still didn't find anything. There was nothing special in the plum blossom house. Why did the plain-clothed female cultivator create such a world that they couldn't get out of? Where was the test of the 3rd round? So, Sumo closed his eyes. In fact, that was the most common way to break illusions. Because once one's vision was closed, other senses would become more acute. Although Sumo was a venerable, it was still suitable. Closing his eyes, Sumo entered a meditative state. Gradually, there was no sound in his meditation world. The plum tree, the bamboo house, the bridge, and so on were all erased by Sumo in this meditation world. Everything was empty. However, Sumo suddenly found that the only thing left in his meditation world was the stove and the copper kettle on it. Moreover, there were sounds coming from the copper kettle, and steam was spreading in all directions. Sumo was very puzzled. Why did the stove and the copper kettle stay in his meditation world, and why did they have such a clear imprint? Immediately after, he discovered that the water vapor in the copper pot was actually rising into the air in strands and strands. Theoretically, that was impossible, because the water vapor should have melted, but it didn't. Instead, it flew higher and higher. That's not water vapor. Sumo's heart skipped a beat, and he immediately opened his eyes. Sure enough, in the sky, there were strands of white light floating up. That was something he had overlooked before. So, Sumo's heart skipped a beat, and he leaped up, heading straight for the water vapor in the sky. Whoosh. As Sumo flew up, everything around him suddenly changed. The plum blossom house began to collapse, the entire ancient village began to disappear, and the surrounding sea also began to dry up. Sumo couldn't help but raise his brows. It seemed like the water vapor was the key. The white light didn't disperse, and it flew higher and higher at an extremely fast speed. At this time, Sumo had already flown into the outer space of the immortal planet. The water vapor had completely turned into a white line, and the entire immortal planet had already collapsed. In the galaxy, there were many white lines that converged into a stream. It was something Sumo had never seen before in his previous travels. They were all flying in the same direction. And in Sumo's memory, that direction was the former center of the galaxy, which was also the place where AMU destroyed the Karma Roulette. It could be said that it was the starting point of the galaxy. Without hesitation, Sumo started his space jump. After a few jumps, a vast ocean appeared in front of him, surging with great momentum. And in the center of the ocean, there was a black whirlpool. That scene was so familiar. Chapter 874. Ocean Whirlpool. In fact, Sumo couldn't remember how many times he had seen a whirlpool like this. But every time it was different. Now, the ocean in front of him was dark blue. Moreover, there was no fragrance in this ocean, nor were there many lotus flowers. This didn't seem like the kind of ocean he had seen before. But the whirlpool was endless, absorbing water from all directions. That whirlpool was like a bottomless black hole, swallowing everything. Sumo's mood suddenly became a bit depressed. At this time, he suddenly found that everything around him seemed to have disappeared. In a daze, all he could see was seawater. In fact, he should be standing in the center of the galaxy world, but when he looked into the distance, there was only a little bit of unextinguished starlight at the edge of the galaxy. That feeling was like he was in the underworld, looking up at the lights of the human world. It was ethereal and unreal. At the same time, Sumo saw the white lights floating in the galaxy all fly into that black whirlpool. They came one after another. What was that whirlpool? Sumo didn't have an answer. Whoosh a whoosh, above the ocean, huge waves surged, each wave was 100 feet high. But they would eventually melt into that whirlpool, unable to escape. Whoosh, a gust of wind blew. Not far in front of Sumo, a figure gradually appeared. It was none other than the female cultivator in plain clothes who set up the trap. She looked the same as before, but the hatchet at her waist was gone. "Demon King, what do you think?" the female cultivator asked. "What do you mean?" Sumo didn't understand. "How is the scenery here?" The female cultivator smiled. "What is this place?" Sumo didn't answer and asked back. "This is the reincarnation land of the galaxy world, or some people call it the Eye of the Wind Wheel," the female cultivator replied. "Eye of the Wind Wheel?" Sumo couldn't help but think of the Wind Wheel Lotus world that the white-robed Guardian King told him about. The white-robed Guardian King said that each Wind Wheel Lotus world was composed of a wind wheel, a perfume sea, and many world lotuses. But even the white-robed Guardian King couldn't completely understand the Wind Wheel Lotus world. He said that his cultivation level was too low. Sumo thought about it but didn't say it out loud. "That's right." The plain-clothed female cultivator smiled faintly. "Demon King, you have already recovered to the third stage venerable realm in the Izong world. Although this is not your peak cultivation back then, you should have a new understanding of the origins of the many worlds, right?" "What do you mean?" Sumo said. "You should know where the many worlds came from, what they all evolved from." The cloth-clothed female cultivator said. "The worlds were evolved from the world lotus. As for the world lotus, it was planted by the lotus warriors. I heard that at the third stage of the lotus realm, one can plant lotuses, then use the lotuses to nourish one's body and continuously cultivate. Is that true?" "More or less." The plain-clothed female cultivator nodded again. "However, not all lotus warriors can plant lotuses, or rather, choose to plant lotuses. Planting lotuses is the main method of cultivation, but some lotus warriors never plant lotuses. They choose to seize other lotuses?" Sumo's lips curled. "The legendary purifiers?" Hee. The plain-clothed female cultivator couldn't help but be slightly stunned. "Demon King, it seems like there are some things you know. Indeed, the purifiers do exist. The Milky Way has been purified by them?" Sumo smiled coldly. "Who are they?" "This question, I cannot answer you." The plain-clothed female cultivator shook her head. Because those purifiers are above me. I am just an ordinary lotus warrior. The purifiers are not people I can fight against. Ordinary lotus warrior? Sumo smiled helplessly. Senior, you haven't planted lotuses yet? Soon. The plain-clothed female cultivator smiled. After dealing with your matter, I will be complete. Sumo said, Senior, then why did you lead me to see the Milky Way world, and this eye of the wind wheel? What exactly do you want? Don't be anxious. You will know soon. The plain-clothed female cultivator said, When a lotus is born, there is often a lotus that dies. Our world is actually above the sea. That sea is called the perfume sea. It is said that there are wind wheels beneath it. Above the sea, countless realm lotuses are nourished. One lotus is a world. Sumo listened silently, not responding. The plain-clothed female cultivator's words could be verified with what the white-robed Dharmaraja said that day. Success, residence, failure, and emptiness, endless reincarnation, all in the perfume sea. And when a lotus is truly about to wither and perish, a black whirlpool like this will appear. Hearing this, Sumo couldn't help but look at the black whirlpool again. You mean to say that the former Milky Way has already been completely destroyed? No. The plain-clothed female cultivator shook her head. If the Milky Way was really destroyed, what you would see would be a black sea. But now, this place is only dark blue. A hidden world cannot completely swallow the Milky Way. However, the Milky Way is already a withered lotus, like a cultivator on his last breath. Every realm lotus has a so-called eye of the wind wheel, because legend has it that when a realm lotus dies, apart from a part of its power being absorbed, most of its power will go into the wind wheel. Did you see those water vapors before? The plain-clothed female cultivator said. I saw it. Sumo asked, That's the soul energy of the Milky Way world, right? Sort of. In fact, it's not just soul energy but also some karma, power of the world, and so on. The plain-clothed female cultivator said, And what I showed you is actually another aspect of the destruction of the Milky Way world. That is a situation that the past you absolutely could not see. At that time, everyone in the Milky Way world seemed to have turned into white light and then fell into the eye of the wind wheel. Then what will happen if one falls into the eye of the wind wheel? Sumo asked. Eternal destruction. The plain-clothed female cultivator shook her head with a bitter smile. This is also the saddest aspect of the realm lotus. Once it is not fully mature, it will one day go towards destruction. This kind of destruction is not reincarnation, but eternal. They will never come again. Sumo frowned again. Then what's the solution? That's exactly what I wanted to say. The plain-clothed female cultivator said, The reason why the Milky Way world is not completely destroyed, and there are still many cultivators in the samsara of Izong, is because someone used their body to fill the sea. Used their body to fill the sea? Sumo couldn't help but be stunned. Who? What do you think? The plain-clothed female cultivator looked at Sumo with a faint smile. Mu. Sumo's eyes lit up, as if she suddenly understood. Haha, that's right. The plain-clothed female cultivator smiled, and then let out a long sigh. The Milky Way world is really fortunate to have a cultivator like Mu. Without Amu, the Milky Way world would have perished long ago. Isn't Amu sealed in the glaze realm? Sumo questioned. That's right. The plain-clothed female cultivator nodded, because the glaze realm is the place where the Milky Way and Izong merge. Amu was sealed there, in exchange for the Milky Way world's survival. Chapter 875. Small Plum Blossom House? Sumo never expected that he would see the small plum blossom house when he opened his eyes. It was like he didn't expect that he could fully awaken his power after entering the eye of the wind wheel. In a trance, it was like a great dream. He didn't know how long had passed in the dream. In his right hand, the ice plum branch was curved and beautiful, but it was not Wu. Sumo waved his hand and put the cold plum branch into the cosmos bag. Then, he looked at the world around him again. Did he not pass the test? Or was he still in the test? However, he had already awakened all of his powers. Could it be that he had returned to the starting point? However, when Sumo looked carefully, he saw some clues. This small plum blossom house was not exactly the same as what he saw in the Xing River world or the illusion just now. That was because there were continuous mountains in the distance. There were no ancient villages or seas here. Moreover, the spiritual energy here was extremely special. That was not the aura of the Xing River world. Sumo's heart skipped a beat. This was not the Xing River world. But where was this? Sumo wanted to spread out his divine sense. However, there was always an inexplicable force suppressing his divine sense. That force came from the world in front of him. The level of this space was quite high. So, Sumo walked forward slowly. After all, the small plum blossom house was not far away. In the distance, he had already seen the 4 ugly words on the blue stone. That was definitely Wu Er's handwriting. In the past, Wu Er deliberately wrote it like that. The small plum blossom house, the 4 words were full of childlike interest. Sumo moved forward, his heart full of doubts. After all, the previous female cultivator in plain clothes did not appear again. Until now, Sumo was not quite sure whether he was in that situation or not. Since arriving near the Kuan Butterfly Star Sea, everything seemed to be out of Sumo's control. The Lotus Warrior was an existence that the current Sumo could not reach. Walking forward, it was only 7 or 8 feet away. Sumo had already seen the fenced door of the small plum blossom house. In the fence yard, the ancient plum blossom was towering. The plum blossom was taller and more luxuriant than the one in the Xing River world. The bamboo house and the bridge were exactly the same. Suemo took a step forward and went straight to the fence gate. However, at this moment, 2 figures suddenly appeared in front of the fence, one tall and one short. They were 2 gray-robed cultivators. One was tall and the other was short, and the other was fat and thin. They looked quite funny standing together. However, their eyes were clear and bright, and their expressions were calm. As soon as the 2 gray-robed cultivators appeared, Suemo was stunned. Because Suemo knew these 2 people, Huang Zhe and Deng Feng. They were the 2 senior brothers who had been taking care of Suemo after he joined the 5-wheel sect. However, they had all mysteriously disappeared in the end. Suemo had never imagined that he would see the 2 of them here. Moreover, their realms were already at the 3rd level of the Eternal Realm. This should not be in world. Realm. Senior Huang, Senior Deng. Suemo exclaimed. Then, he bowed slightly to Huang Zhe and Deng Feng. Demon King, don't stand on ceremony. The 2 returned the greeting, but Huang Zhe was the only one who spoke. In my previous life, Demon King did not forget. That is the greatest kindness. We have been waiting for you for a long time. Sumo was surprised. Senior brothers, what is this place? Am I still in the test? Oh? Ha! Huang Zhe and Deng Feng couldn't help but burst into laughter. Demon King, everything here is real, Huang Zhe said. You have passed the 3rd test, but you stayed in the space tunnel for some years. Now this is the Kuan Butterfly Mystic Realm. This is the Kuan Butterfly Mystic Realm? Sumo could not believe it. Yes. Huang Zhe said. What is going on? Where is the plain-clothed female cultivator who set me up? Sumo asked. How long was I in the space tunnel? Demon King, come with us. You will understand everything in a moment. Huang Zhe and Deng Feng reached out to invite her. Then they turned around and opened the gate. Sumo was confused, but she did not ask. She followed them closely. They walked past the bamboo house and crossed the bridge. They actually passed through the plum blossom hut and entered a relatively long and narrow valley. This was not the immortal planet of the galaxy. Back then, There was no such valley behind the plum blossom house. On both sides of the valley, there were towering ancient trees and exotic flowers. But among the ancient trees and flowers, there were many runes floating on them. Those runes were colorful and extremely beautiful. They were like colorful butterflies flying among the trees and flowers. What a powerful array formation! Suemo secretly observed, and could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. Now, he had regained all of his previous cultivation. He saw it as soon as he entered the valley. This valley was a formation that Jing Xian had set up. Every mountain, every rock, every grass and every tree was a formation artifact. And the runes flying in the air were extremely mysterious mechanisms. That was because they were changing at every moment. In other words, the formation they used to pass through the valley was different every moment. Such an array formation simply made it impossible for anyone to make a move. Sumo thought that even the current him did not have the ability to break the formation. Unless it was someone like 7th Senior Sister, it was impossible to break the formation. This must be a formation set up by the Lotus Warriors. He still did not understand the profoundness of it. The entire valley was only about 3 miles long. It was neither long nor short. After passing through the valley, the front suddenly opened up. It was an extremely spacious area with a radius of 1,000 feet. In the middle there was an antique wooden building. The wooden building had a total of 3 floors. It was quite large. The eaves and corners were hung, and the beams were carved and painted. It was gorgeous but dignified, full of ancient charm. At the same time, there was a faint 5-colored divine light on the top of the wooden building. Sumo narrowed his eyes. Vaguely, there was a butterfly spreading its wings in the air above the wooden building. The butterfly covered an area with a radius of 1,000 feet. Its wings were colorful and covered with all kinds of strange patterns. In fact, all the patterns were formed by runes. It wasn't a real butterfly, but rather a projection of a spell. Because Sumo was at the peak of the supremacy realm, he could see the butterfly. Ordinary cultivators would definitely not be able to see it, not to mention other cultivators. Even Huang Zhe and Deng Feng, who were leading the way, had never seen the Kuan butterfly in the air. The Kuan butterfly image. Sumo could not help but be moved. At that moment, he saw a horizontal plaque on the wooden building, Kuan butterfly formless. Demon King, this is the formless tower of the Kuan butterfly mystic realm. Huang Zhe and Deng Feng stopped in their tracks. From the looks of it, they were not prepared or qualified to enter the formless tower. Just as Sumo was about to ask, a cultivator appeared in front of the formless tower. The cultivator was dressed in black and had a handsome face. He smiled at Sumo. Demon King, it's been a long time. Senior brother Shenlang. Sumo was stunned again. Demon King, there's no need to be surprised. Shenlang laughed. My master is waiting for you in the tower. All of your questions should be answered. Chapter 876. Amu was sealed there in exchange for a breath of life in the galaxy. These words hit Sumo's chest like a heavy hammer. At the same time, he felt a deep stabbing pain. Sumo's complexion changed, his cheeks tightened. Because at that moment, he felt that he should be like Amu, filling the sea with his own body. Sumo, Amu, 1 positive and 1 negative of the karma roulette. At the same time, they were also the 2 lotus souls of the 3 realms galaxy. Then, Amu shouldn't have to bear all of this alone. However, what Sumo could do now was very limited. Demon King, the reason you can temporarily be worry-free in Izong is because someone is bearing the burden for you. The plain-clothed female cultivator said, I think you should understand this truth. I understand. Sumo took a deep breath, then nodded. In fact, besides the plain-clothed female cultivator, Wang Yu had also said this before. Wasn't Amu maintaining the 3 realms galaxy? Very good. The plain-clothed female cultivator nodded. Then, the plain-clothed female cultivator waved her hands in the void. Whoosh, on the ink-blue sea, huge waves rose again. The entire sea was rolling, as if a tsunami was about to happen. The waves were thousands of feet high. Layers of waves rose, and then a huge object slowly rose from the waves. It was a huge bronze scale. It was thousands of feet high. Its beam was carved with the sun, moon, and stars, as well as many strange runes. On top of the beam, there was a lotus flower. However, the lotus flower was in bud, a flower bud. On both sides of the beam, there were 2 silk threads, one black and one white. From afar, it looked like 2 waterfalls falling from the sky. Under the thread, there was a huge copper plate. The copper plate was empty, and there were no weights on it. The entire scale exuded an ancient aura. Gray mist lingered around it, giving off a mysterious and unfathomable feeling. What is this? A magic weapon? Sumo had never seen such a thing before. What is this? Sumo asked the plain-robed female cultivator. It's called the Lotus Realm's Sky Scale. The plain-clothed female cultivator said. What's it for? Sumo asked again. It measures the weight of life. The plain-clothed female cultivator said with a faint smile. Actually, every Lotus Realm has a scale like this. It could screen out those who could fill the sea with their own bodies. If such a person were to enter the eye of the windwheel, he would be able to temporarily preserve a world that was about to be destroyed. Sumo frowned and said, Then can I fly up to the scale and try? Ha ha. Hearing Sumo's words, the plain-clothed female cultivator shook her head. This is not a test for you. In a while, I will let you choose who to throw into the eye of the windwheel. Sumo's heart skipped a beat. Because he had a bad premonition. When he looked again, he saw that the female cultivator was standing in the void, forming seals with her hands. That was actually a set of rather complicated spells. Actually, when a cultivator reached the supremacy realm, they could already create spells with a single thought. At this moment, the plain-clothed female cultivator was actually forming seals with her hands. That was enough to show how powerful this spell was. Sumo looked at the spell of the plain-clothed female cultivator. A gray light rose from the plain-clothed female cultivator's body. It was extremely similar to the light of primal chaos. Then, the gray light directly surged towards the whirlpool of the sea. The gray light filled the sky, instantly filling the entire whirlpool. It was like a gray seal. At the same time, the Lotus Realm's scale directly flew above the gray light. When he looked again, the white light that was surging from all directions began to gather on the copper plate on one side of the scale. Immediately, the scale began to gradually tilt. The plain-clothed female cultivator's hand seal changed. At this moment, an ancient bronze weight appeared on the other side of the scale. That weight was actually a rather ugly stone. However, on it floated a line of small words. 1,000 immeasurable souls, one soul suppresses the sea. Looking at those words, Sumo did not understand what they meant for a moment. And the moment that weight appeared, it directly tilted the scale towards the side of the weight. Every ray of white light represents the life of a galaxy. The plain-clothed female cultivator looked at the Lotus Realm scale and said, As long as both sides reach a balance, then it will be able to fill up the life weight of the eye of the wind wheel. Then how many lives do we need? Sumo asked. Hee. The plain-clothed female cultivator shook her head and smiled bitterly. Demon King, did you not see the words on the scale? 1,000 immeasurable souls, one soul suppresses the sea. The weight of everyone's life is different. The so-called 1,000 immeasurable souls means that even if there are thousands of lives, they don't have a trace of weight. One soul suppresses the sea means that one life can fill up everything. So that's how it is. Sumo took a deep breath. At this moment, the entire eye of the wind wheel was temporarily sealed by the plain-clothed female cultivator's gray light. Thus, all of the white light gathered on the copper plate. 1, 10,000, 100,000,000. The white light continued to condense into a circle. Gradually, a white ball of light appeared on the wheel, and that ball of light became bigger and bigger. Then, it actually changed color. From white, it became 3 colors. From 3 colors, it became 7 colors, and then all the way until it became multicolored, mysterious, and illusory. An unknown amount of time passed. Neither Sumo nor the plain-clothed female cultivator said anything. However, gradually, Sumo's frown became deeper and deeper, because the current appearance of the ball of light seemed to be the shape of a galaxy. It was clearly a mini-galaxy ball, and at this moment one side of the weight was slowly lifted. Finally, they reached a balance. "Enough?" Sumo asked. "Yes." The plain-clothed female cultivator's expression was calm. However, at the same time, Sumo discovered that the world around him no longer had any white light, and the starlight that he could see in the distance earlier had also been completely annihilated. "How many lives are there?" Sumo asked. "Lives?" the plain-clothed female cultivator replied. "What?" Sumo frowned. "I said, those are the lives of the galaxy." The plain-clothed female cultivator sighed softly. "Lives?" Sumo was startled, then slowly said, "If we use lives to fill the CI, then what's the point?" "That's right." The plain-clothed female cultivator nodded. "However, I still have a soul here. It might be able to fill the CI. "Who?" Sumo asked. In fact, he already had a vague guess in his heart, but he still couldn't help but ask. He didn't want it to be the result that he predicted. "Look." The plain-clothed female cultivator waved her hand. Looking again, a figure appeared out of thin air in the void. It was a green-clothed female, with a cold temperament, extraordinary and refined. Between her eyebrows there was a plum blossom mark. As soon as she appeared, the entire void was filled with a faint fragrance. "Wu Er." Sumo's expression changed, because it was not an illusion, but a real existence. "Xiao Lang, long time no see." Wu Er's face was filled with endless joy, but also a bit reserved, because she saw the plain-clothed female cultivator. Sumo leaped up, heading straight for Wu Er. However, his body was fixed in place by the plain-clothed female cultivator in midair. "Demon King, please don't be impatient. You haven't made a choice. How can you approach her?" the plain-clothed female cultivator said. At the same time, she pushed outwards with one hand. Plum Blossom 5 air directly landed on the side of the Lotus World scale that held the weight. At this time, that weight disappeared. However, the scale did not move at all. So, Plum Blossom 5 air was equivalent to all lives. Chapter 877. The heavenly scale is equal, and Wu Er is equal to all living beings. Sumo stood in the void in a daze, her expression complicated. "Why is it like this?" "Senior, Wu Er is just a plum blossom spirit. How can she be equal to all living beings?" Sumo turned to look at the female cultivator, somewhat doubtful. "This is the choice of the heavenly scale of the Lotus Realm," the female cultivator said. But, Sumo frowned and wanted to say something. "Because she is entangled with you by karma." The female cultivator interrupted Sumo's words. "Aren't Mu and Shin Yen sealed together? Wu Er is a part of you, perhaps even the most important part. That's why she can be equal to all living beings." "Then what do we do now?" Sumo asked. "Now it's time for you to make a choice. This is your test." The female cultivator said, "All living beings and Wu Er can fill the ocean eye. Either you choose to give up on all living beings or you choose to give up on Wu Er. Your choice will determine their future." "This is an illusion." Sumo shook her head and then said with certainty. The female cultivator also shook her head. "Demon King, at your level of cultivation, if you are still entangled with reality and illusion and reality, then I'm afraid you will never reach the Lotus Realm." Sumo raised her eyebrows and did not speak. Because the female cultivator was right. At this moment, whether it was reality or illusion, it was actually a test of Sumo's state of mind. All of this had nothing to do with reality or illusion. Reality was illusion, illusion was also reality. This test was a test of Sumo's state of mind. If that's the case, I am willing to replace Wu Er. Sumo's expression was solemn, her voice low. Me and AMU, one positive and one negative, are both lotus souls. Then if AMU can fill the sea, of course I can too. The female cultivator shook her head again and laughed. Of course not. Demon King, this test is for you to choose between all living beings and Wu Er. You are not one of them. Besides, both you and AMU are filling the sea. Who's going to restore the galaxy? Of course, if you don't want the Three Realms galaxy to be reborn, that's another matter. The plain-clothed female cultivator looked at Sumo. Make your choice, Demon King. I'll give you the time it takes for a stick of incense to burn. Before the incense is extinguished, you must make a choice. Otherwise, you will be trapped in this world. You should understand that this is a world you can't leave. Sumo's eyes narrowed. Because before, he really couldn't leave this world. Looking again, the plain-clothed female cultivator waved her hand. A long purple incense stick appeared in front of Sumo. The stick of incense was only as thick as a thumb, about 3 feet high, and it had already been lit. The smell of smoke rose in spirals, and the waves surged. At this time, Sumo and the scale seemed to be separated by a misty world. Wu Er stood on the copper plate with a blank expression, because she could no longer see Sumo. She didn't even know where she was, or where she was. Xiao Lang, Wu Er looked left and right, calling out at the same time. Unfortunately, she couldn't get out of the copper plate, nor could she hear any response. However, Sumo was able to see and hear them. Each of Wu Er's calls clearly fell into Sumo's ears. Wu Er. Sumo's face was slightly pale, but he was firmly fixed. He wanted to break through the layers of obstruction and fly to Wu Er's side, but he couldn't. Chi. In fact, the burning of the purple incense stick made no sound at all. However, in Sumo's ears, there was an ear-piercing sound. That stick of incense seemed to burn Sumo's heart. At this time, the copper plate on the other side showed the lights of tens of thousands of households, the joy of the mortal world. Some were reading, some were farming, some were listening to the rain, some were bathing in the wind, some were smiling, some were crying bitterly. Of course, some died, some lived. In fact, these were all extremely ordinary scenes in the mortal world. However, at this time, when it appeared on the Lotus World scale, it was actually so intoxicating. The process of life was actually the most beautiful existence in vast universe. Those scenes similarly pierced Sumo's heart. The incense stick had already burned halfway. Sumo's eyes were somewhat blood-red. Because that was really a choice that wanted to cut open her entire heart and shred it into pieces. In one hand was all living beings, in the other was true love. In fact, if there was really another choice, Sumo was really willing to use his body to fill the sea, not letting down the common people, not letting down his love. Could it be that there was no method in this world that was perfect for both? Demon King, there is no method in this world that is perfect for both. The cloth-clothed female cultivator seemed to understand Sumo's thoughts. Here, you have to choose. If it is perfect for both, it is against the rules. Yes. Sumo nodded heavily. He understood the cloth-clothed female cultivator's words. She had to choose one of the two, and she could only choose one. Phew, Sumo let out a turbid breath. Demon King, you actually already have an answer in your heart, right? The cloth-clothed female cultivator said lightly. However, don't forget your purpose in coming to the Kuan Butterfly Star Ocean. In theory, as long as you choose all living beings, you can reunite with Wu Er. Sumo smiled helplessly. Senior, of course I know my purpose in coming to the Kuan Butterfly Star Ocean. I'm here to find Wu Er. Then give up on all living beings. The cloth-clothed female cultivator said, then reunite with Wu Er. Those living beings, actually, one day you can become a lotus warrior and then plant lotuses. You can have even more new living beings. Then it's not the Star River. Sumo let out a long sigh. Then give up on Wu Er. The cloth-clothed female cultivator said again, after all, if you want, you can have countless plum blossom spirits. You can even have many worlds. But in all the worlds, there is only one Wu Er. Sumo said again, she is unique. The cloth-clothed female cultivator shook her head and did not say anything else. She did not want to disturb Sumo. She only hoped that Sumo had his own answer. The incense continued to burn. The specks of light were insignificant in the void. However, it burned very quickly. At least, from Sumo's point of view, it burned very quickly. 7 inches, 5 inches, 3 inches, the sizzling sound lingered in his heart. Sumo's face was already somewhat pale. In fact, he already had an answer in his heart. However, this kind of choice was simply a kind of torment. Sumo had not suffered that kind of torment in a long time. In all the worlds, he had experienced countless tribulations, but there were still some that he could not overcome. Xiao Huang once said, in his heart, Yuluo was more important than all living beings. The moment he heard those words, Sumo had once cursed him for being a vile creature. However, at this moment, he seemed to somewhat understand Xiao Huang's feelings. Some people, in your heart, are really comparable to all living beings. At this moment, Sumo actually wanted to praise Xiao Huang for his love and courage, for his determination without hesitation. Xiao Huang. Sumo could not help but mutter to himself. However, Sumo took a deep breath. Because he was not Xiao Huang. He was the demon king of the 3 realms, he was the nether sovereign, he was a lotus soul of the 3 realms galaxy. Chi, the incense was about to burn out. Sumo closed his eyes and said in a low voice, I leave behind all living beings. Boom! As soon as Sumo's voice fell, the Tianheng copper plate suddenly flipped. The gray light covering the cloth-clothed female cultivator had already dispersed. Plum Blossom 5 Er's body fell straight into the eye of the windwheel. Xiaolang. That was Wu Er's final cry. Wu Er. Sumo's eyes snapped open, his face deathly pale. At the same time, his body flew up. In that instant, he actually broke free of the cloth-clothed female cultivator's restraint. Sumo immediately grabbed Wu Er's hand, just like before. Whoosh, whoosh, however, the whirlpool could not be stopped. 2 figures, one green and one white, were swept into the eye of the windwheel. AI. In the void, the cloth-clothed female cultivator's helpless sigh came. Chapter 878. Through life and death, he would live up to his feelings. Although Sumo chose to leave all living beings behind, the moment Wu Er fell into the eye of the windwheel, he almost couldn't control himself. So, he chose to hold Wu Er's hand. At that moment, he was willing to fill the sea with Wu Er. Perhaps this could be considered living up to all living beings, living up to his true love. Whoosh, whoosh, as the two jumped in, the eye of the windwheel suddenly closed. The black vortex instantly disappeared. At that moment, in the void, opposite of the cloth-clothed female cultivator, another cloth-clothed female cultivator appeared. The two of them were almost identical, but the female cultivator who came out later had a hatchet at her waist. You knew this would be the result, right? The cloth-clothed female cultivator said. Ha ha! The cloth-clothed female cultivator shook her head with a bitter smile. How would I know? That's just what Wu Er predicted. In fact, he didn't want to abandon all living beings and Wu Er. But I made him choose one. That's why he chose the greater good of all living beings. Perhaps this is the Demon King's charm. The cloth-clothed female cultivator nodded. Sigh. The cloth-clothed female cultivator sighed again and waved her hand. Looking again, the Lotus World's scale suddenly dissipated. At this moment, there was no sea or galaxy around them. The place they were in was just a part of the starry sky between the Kuan Butterfly Barrier and the Kuan Butterfly Star Ocean. Looking into the distance, the stars were shining brightly. The Demon King and Wu Heir are about to reunite. Our mission is basically complete. The cloth-clothed female cultivator with the hatchet at her waist smiled. We're finally close to completion. The cloth-clothed female cultivator nodded and took a step forward, directly merging with the hatchet cloth-clothed female cultivator. She was just a clone. Chaotic, unable to distinguish between things. Sumo leaped up and grabbed Wu Heir's hand, but that was only for an instant. At first, he could still feel the warmth of Wu Heir's hand. But later, that hand gradually turned cold. Sumo felt like he wasn't grabbing a hand, but a block of ice. Wu Heir. Wu Heir. Sumo couldn't see anything around him, so he called out anxiously like a nightmare. However, he didn't get a response. Sumo really wanted to pull Wu Heir into her arms, but she seemed to have no strength at all. A feeling of exhaustion and powerlessness took over Sumo's body and mind. Sumo couldn't see her surroundings clearly. It was like the most primitive state of chaos, and Sumo seemed to have been born again in the chaos. Time and space had lost their meaning. However, Sumo knew that she was sinking. However, he did not know how long this process would take. He only made himself hold Wu Heir's hand tightly, using all the strength he still had. Although that hand no longer had any warmth. Was this really just a test? Or could it be that everything had already solidified into reality, and he had already filled up the eye of the wind wheel of the Milky Way? Sumo asked herself in her heart. But no matter what, at that moment, Sumo's mood began to gradually calm down. In front of the Lotus World, choosing to leave all living beings behind, Sumo could be at ease. Leaping up and holding Wu Heir's hand, Sumo could also be at ease. No regrets. So, Sumo simply closed his eyes. At that moment, he was willing to think of nothing, to do nothing. This seemed to be the calmest moment Sumo had ever experienced in his many tens of thousands of years. This moment, perhaps it was only an instant or it could have been 10,000 years. Sumo could temporarily enjoy it. Whoosh, whoosh, however, unknowingly, Sumo felt that there was an indescribable power surging in his Dan Sea. And that power was getting stronger and stronger. In the center of his Dan Sea there was actually a whirlpool forming. It was somewhat similar to the sea and whirlpool he saw before. Inside his Dan Sea there was gradually a huge wave. It was an extremely surging power, but all the power began to converge into that whirlpool. However, that whirlpool was not black, but gold. That was not the eye of the windwheel. Although all of this was happening inside his body, Sumo did not know it was happening. His Dan Sea was expanding infinitely, and the golden whirlpool in the center was also expanding. It was like the mouth of a giant golden beast, about to devour everything. Whoosh, whoosh, the power was endless, surging without end. Sumo did not know how long that feeling lasted. It seemed to be an extremely long process, because he saw that the sky above his Dan Sea had turned from green to yellow, and then from yellow to blue. It seemed to be the passing of time. The scene in his Dan Sea seemed to be still, but in reality it was always moving. Boom, whoosh, suddenly there was a sound like muffled thunder. Looking again, Sumo's entire Dan Sea had become a whirlpool. The sea was gone, only the whirlpool remained. Then, in that whirlpool, layers of huge waves began to surge upward. They surged unceasingly, as if they were piling up lotus platforms. And on those lotus platforms many images flashed. Those images were all of Sumo. But they were all of his appearances in the Three Realms galaxy. Xiao Luo in white, Murong Huang in black, the demon lord who had devoured Li Hin's body, and the Dark Lord who had broken through all the seals. Those were the different bodies of Sumo in the Three Realms galaxy. They appeared one by one, then disappeared one by one. It was all like a dream. However, every journey was a story that could not be erased. Whoosh, boom, Sumo felt his soul trembling uncontrollably. All the power was awakening. As the past him appeared and disappeared one by one, the golden whirlpool finally collapsed. For a moment, Sumo felt like his body was about to explode. The surging power was stronger than the Milky Way. Boom, crack, boom, in the depths of his Dan-si, a loud sound rolled. All the power began to pour into Sumo's limbs and bones. This process also took an unknown amount of time. Sumo's cultivation level continued to rise. The feeling of powerlessness and exhaustion just now was disappearing. That was the last awakened power in Sumo's body. Actually, it was the power that had always been hidden in Sumo's body. That was the power of a peak venerable. It had always belonged to Sumo. Back then, when Sumo almost died fighting Chi Wuhui, this power had awakened once. Now, he had once again triggered this power. Therefore, this was the second awakening and also the last. Return. All the power he had. 4th tier venerable, 5th tier venerable, 6th tier venerable whoosh. Sumo finally felt that he was no longer falling. At the same time, his Dan-si also calmed down. But there was still a small whirlpool in the center of his Dan-si. Peak venerable. Then, Sumo suddenly opened his eyes. His gaze was like lightning. At that moment, he was the real Dark Lord. Sumo's first glance was at his right hand. However, what he was holding in his hand wasn't Wu air at all, but a plum branch with ice on it. Thus, he frowned and looked up. Not far away was the Plum Blossom Hut. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.